After a man went to the hospital and had both testicles removed, he realized they had operated on the wrong part. The cancer cells had already spread throughout his entire body. But upon finding out, instead of getting angry, he tightly gripped the safety amulet his wife had left him and burst into laughter, because the man felt that only such a death leaving him without descendants could appease the departed soul of his wife. But when you open your eyes again, what you see is the double happiness character covered in dust, stuck to the window of your old family home. Then you quickly run a lap inside and outside the house, only to see Lin Qingshui completely naked, curled up on the earthen bed. At this moment, her large eyes are filled with signs of death, and her originally fair, flawless body is covered in crisscrossing bruises. Seeing the woman who has haunted your dreams for most of your life once again, you instantly become overwhelmed with emotion. You immediately step forward and pull her into a tight embrace, having too much guilt and longing to express. Though at this moment, it all gets choked up in your throat, and you begin to cry out of sheer grief. In your past life, you schemed to make Lin Qingshui fall into the reservoir, resulting in the whole village seeing her with disheveled clothes after being rescued by you. For the sake of her reputation, she was forced to marry you. But from the moment Lin Qingshui entered your household, she never enjoyed a single good day. Amid your endless domestic violence, she jumped into the reservoir while holding your child, ending her own life. It wasn't until her older brother pulled the bodies of the mother and daughter out of the river that you finally woke up to reality. After that, although you rode the wave of the era's economic boom and amassed wealth that couldn't be spent in 10 lifetimes, the woman who taught you how to grow up at the cost of her life was already gone. Just as you are immersed in the joy of rebirth, a sharp piercing cry suddenly rings out, "Get lost! Don't touch me!" Looking at Lin Qingshui trembling all over at this moment, you finally remember that. Right now, Lin Qingshui had just returned from borrowing money from her parents' house to buy rice paste for the child, only for you to snatch it away to buy alcohol. And what's more, after coming home drunk, and brutally tortured her on the bed. Thinking of this, you raised your hand and fiercely slapped yourself over a dozen times. Soon blood began to flow down from the corner of your mouth. Lin Qingshui watched your actions quietly, unable to suppress a sarcastic smile. She could no longer remember how many times this had happened. After all, every time you sobered up, you would kneel and beg for forgiveness. But before 2 days could even pass, your fists and kicks would rain down on Lin Qingshui's body once again. She could endure your humiliating torture on the bed, but she could not bear the baby starving with nothing to eat. The weak crying of the baby brought a slight glimmer of life back into Lin Qingshui's beautiful phoenix eyes. Flustered, she threw on some clothes and picked up her daughter. But because Lin Qingshui suffered from long-term malnutrition, it resulted in the little one being unable to suck out any milk, making her cry out loudly again. And your daughter's crying also snapped you awake. You immediately got out of bed and picked up the clothes on the floor. "Wife, wait for me, I'll go get something for our little girl to eat right now." Saying this, you ran with long strides toward the small grocery store at the head of the village. When old man Huang at the store saw you, he bared his big yellow teeth and asked, "What kind of alcohol do you want on credit this time?" "Uncle Huang, can I get some rice paste on credit? I will definitely give you the money tomorrow." Hearing that you wanted to buy on credit again, old man Huang sized up the red and swollen handprints on your face and said absolutely nothing, taking a bag of rice paste from the shelf for you. After expressing your deep gratitude, you rushed back home in a hurry. When you stepped inside the room and saw your wife was still exactly as she was when you left, your heart couldn't help but feel a sharp, agonizing pain once again. "Wife, I bought the rice paste back." Hearing your words, Lin Qingshui instantly became highly alert, her pale little face completely filled with terror. "I warn you, don't you dare sell my daughter. Otherwise, I curse your Zhao family to die out without descendants." Seeing this scene, you froze dead in your tracks, vaguely remembering that there indeed seemed to be such an incident. Originally, you had intended to sell your daughter to a couple in the town in exchange for cash to buy alcohol to drink. What kind of scumbag things had you actually done? No wonder you died of advanced cancer in your past life. You totally deserved it. And so, you placed the rice paste from your hand onto the dilapidated small bed. "I swear I will never sell our little girl. Tomorrow I will go to town to look for work." After saying that, you turned around and walked out. Coming outside, you fiercely slapped yourself a few more times. If you remembered correctly, it was in this exact month that Lin Qingshui jumped into the reservoir holding your daughter. Just thinking about this made your entire body shudder. Seeing that it was already getting late and the house had completely run out of food. 20 minutes later, you arrived at the foot of the back mountain. You casually pulled out the elastic band from your underwear and made a slingshot. Crack, you shot a pebble. And a turtle dove flapped its wings and flew up. After you became successful in your past life, you fell in love with the sport of shooting. And you had also played with slingshots for a period of time. Crouching in the grass for quite a while, you finally managed to catch a wild pheasant with a net and used the slingshot to shoot down a few turtle doves. The turtle doves were very small. All four added up weighed no more than 1 or 2 pounds. However, that wild pheasant was as fat as 5 pounds. Tying these things up with vines, you hung them on a tree branch, and just as you prepared to shoulder them home, you suddenly discovered that everything behind you had vanished into thin air. You were instantly drenched in a cold sweat. Had you encountered a ghost? Suddenly, you saw a flash of light from the safety amulet hanging on your chest. This was something your wife always kept close to her body in the past life, made of neither jade nor plastic. It wasn't until she committed suicide by jumping into the river that she took it off and threw it by the edge of the reservoir. When you looked closely, the light from the amulet vanished again, so you couldn't help but reach out to touch it. The next second, you entered a pocket dimension. Judging by the area alone, it wasn't even as large as your hospital ward. After experimenting a few times, you finally understood. Pinching the amulet would let you enter, and just thinking about leaving in your mind would let you out. With this golden finger, you will be able to make a comeback in this lifetime. On the way back home, many households had already switched to electricity, yet your own home was still lit by a mutton fat lamp. The bitterest years of the natural disasters had already passed, yet you actually managed to still live from hand to mouth. Carrying the game, you walked straight into the kitchen. After the sky had turned completely dark, you carried a large ocean-sized bowl of turtle dove soup into the main room. Ching, time to eat. I made turtle dove soup to help you produce milk. After calling out 3 times in a row, Lin Qingshui finally walked out slowly from the inner room. When she saw the turtle dove soup served in the large ocean bowl on the table, she did not rush to approach, but just stood where she was, her eyes completely filled with hatred. At this moment, looking at your wife wearing clothes covered in patches, a wave of sorrow welled up in your heart again. In this era of material scarcity, Lin Qingshui's appearance nonetheless seemed exceptionally stunning. Yet you were just a scumbag, getting your hands on her only to not cherish her. Right now, seeing her full of wariness, although you longed to sit down and share a meal at the same table with her, you also understood that with you being here, she would definitely not touch her chopsticks. I'll go eat in the kitchen. After saying that, you turned around and walked out. Meanwhile, Lin Qingshui stood frozen in place, staring at that large ocean bowl filled with turtle dove meat soup, a sense of unreality welling up in her heart. Is this a dream, or is this a last meal before execution? In the past, whenever there was a bite to eat at home, you would strictly ensure you ate your fill first, while she could only drink the leftover pot washing water. So even though she was starving at this moment, Lin Qingshui did not dare to easily take a bite. It wasn't until she walked out the door and saw you squatting under the window drinking soup, with a large wild pheasant still hanging on the kitchen door, guessing that you must have gone up the mountain to hunt wild game, that Lin Qingshui finally turned back to the main room, picked up the bowl and began to eat. After finishing the meal, under your wife's watchful, vigilant gaze once again, you took over the job of washing the dishes. You used to be a lazy slacker before, so this was probably the very first time you properly did housework in this home. After finishing these tasks, thinking about the scumbag things you did during the day, you went to boil another pot of hot water and brought it into the room. Qing used this water to wipe down your body. After saying that, you put down the basin, turned around, and left in a hurry. Sitting at the doorway after a long time passed, the faint sound of splashing water finally came from inside the room while you looked up at the starry sky, calculating that you had to find a way to make money tomorrow to improve the situation at home as soon as possible. It has already entered autumn now, and the winter temperature of -20 degrees will freeze water into ice. Both your wife and child need new cotton padded clothes. Otherwise, during this winter, your wife and child won't be able to pull through. Hearing the sound of water stop, you then got up and walked into the room. Seeing you suddenly appear, Lin Qingshu was so frightened that she turned her body and repeatedly shrank back. Don't come over here. Seeing this scene, you secretly cursed your past self for being too much of a beast, and you also knew that her psychological knot couldn't be untied in a short time. Therefore, you reminded your wife in a gentle tone, I just came to take the water out. After saying that, you picked up the water from the floor and stepped outside. Lin Qingshui ignored you as well. Seeing you leave the room, she quickly put on her clothes. In the courtyard, using the hot water your wife had used, you gave yourself a simple wash. After all, in order to catch those few turtle doves, you had crawled in the grass for a long time. After washing up, you sat down on the doorstep, reminiscing about the experiences of your past life. There was a period of time when several outsiders kept wanting to go into the mountains to harvest things. Fearing they would get lost, they found you who was idling around to lead the way. At that time, you completely thought these city people had nothing better to do. But you learned their operations through observation, and also knew how to harvest those wild ginsengs. Now you can absolutely dig them up to sell. Thinking of this, you instantly got energized, tied a torch together, prepared some tools that weren't quite professional, and then said toward the room, Ching, lock the door, I'm heading out for a while. This outing took you the entire night, and it wasn't until 4 a.m. that you returned home. Speaking of which, you were also lucky. While coming down the mountain, you accidentally discovered a civet den. From the den, you pulled out a few small civets that hadn't even opened their eyes yet. Returning home, you processed them efficiently, leaving one in the kitchen, before carrying 2 baskets on a shoulder pole to the town. The town held a market on odd-numbered days, so you found a crowded spot and took the civet meat and pelts out of the baskets. Young man, this mountain game looks pretty good. Originally, you thought that if you couldn't sell them, you would just take them back to stew in a single pot and share some with your eldest brother, second brother, and third sister's families. Unexpectedly, right after you set up your items, someone asked about the price of the civet meat. An old man and an old lady saw that you, a young fellow, were tanned dark by the sun, looking just like a mountain dweller at first glance. Coupled with the affordable price, they bought 2 of them in one go. In this day and age, buying meat still requires meat coupons, so only this kind of mountain game can be bought freely to give their little grandson a tasty treat back home. Before leaving, the old lady even pulled at the old man's clothes to gesture to him, and she took all the civet pelts as well, saying she would make gloves for her little grandson at home. Just like that, in less than 2 hours, the civets were completely sold out. Afterwards, you took the heavy goods you harvested yesterday and went to the time-honored pharmacy in the town. When you took out the item, the old man wearing thick glasses stared with wide, unblinking eyes. He carefully took over the heavy goods and examined them thoroughly. Then he gestured a price with his hand. Little brother, how about this price? Seeing the price he offered, you knitted your brows slightly. This man was treating you like an ignorant country bumpkin from the mountains. Therefore, you reached out preparing to take back your item. Seeing this, the old man pressed his hand down on yours and then stroked his goatee to placate you, little brother. If you're not satisfied with the price, we can discuss it further, right? 6.20 bills, I can't go any higher. Although this heavy goods item had been accidentally broken by your foot, its value was still far more than this price. But who told you to be in such urgent need of money? Your wife and child were still starving at home. After pondering for a brief moment, you decided to sell it. Then you went to buy some meat and flour, and it took running to 2 supply and marketing cooperatives before you finally managed to buy baby formula, which was a rare luxury in this era. Just before heading back, you thought about the set of old patched up clothes your wife was wearing yesterday, so you walked into the only small state-owned shopping mall in town. On the way back, you made a detour to visit an old hunter in his 70s. It took giving him a bunch of food before you could trade for his hunting rifle, which he cherished like his own life. See, in this day and age, you need coupons to buy meat, so to achieve the freedom of eating meat, you still have to do it yourself. As you neared home, you suddenly discovered Lin Qingshe working in the field while carrying the child on her back. And when your eldest brother, Zhao Zhenxing, saw you walking over, he instantly flared up in anger. Where the hell did you go off to die again? Leaving your wife to work the field all by herself. Brother? Looking at the eldest brother before you, your nose felt a bit sharp with emotion. I went to town to look for work and brought back some meat and flour while I was at it. Bring sister-in-law and the kids to my place for dinner tonight. Hearing these words, your eldest brother sized you up from head to toe with a highly skeptical gaze. Looking at the mud splatters on your trouser legs, and then at your tightly packed basket, your sister-in-law just steamed a pot of cornmeal buns in the house. Have your wife take a few back later. We won't be heading over to eat. Wang Hao, treat your wife well. Thus, you didn't say anything more. You nodded your head and carried the things back home. If you want to win over your wife, you must first satisfy her stomach. Just like that, you began to busy yourself in the kitchen. By the time the sky was about to turn dark, Lin Qingshu returned home carrying a few cornmeal buns. However, the moment she stepped into the courtyard, she smelled the rich aroma of meat wafting from the kitchen. So she quickly hurried to the kitchen door, only to see you standing and working in front of the crude stove. And having worked all day long, Lin Qingshua's stomach was already sticking to her back from hunger. After putting away the cornmeal buns, she entered the bedroom and placed the soundly sleeping baby onto the small bed. But as soon as she turned her head and saw a can of baby formula sitting on the table, the blood instantly rushed straight to Lin Qingshua's brain. She ran into the kitchen, raised her hand, and slapped you right across the face. Did you go back and force my mom to give you money again? How can you be so shameless? When your wife suddenly brought up this matter, you gradually recalled that a complete scumbag like myself had indeed threatened your mother-in-law with a knife before to demand money. Therefore, you hurriedly spoke up to deny it. This is all money I earned today. Saying this, you quickly reached your hand toward your crotch. Seeing this scene, Lin Qingxue became even angrier. What time do you think it is? And you're still thinking about that. Immediately, she stepped forward and gave you another fierce slap. Getting slapped twice in a row left you not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Seeing that Lin Qingsue had no intention of stopping, you hurriedly pulled out the 5 Datuanjie bills tucked inside your pants. Wife, this is the money I earned today. You keep it. Looking at those few Datuanjie bills stuffed into her hands, only felt her world spinning around. Seeing your wife about to stumble, you reached out to support her, but your hand was fiercely slapped away by Lin Qingsue. She just couldn't bring herself to believe that a loafer like you could earn back so much money in a single day. What kind of shady business had you done out there? What are we going to do now? This life truly cannot be lived anymore. Noticing that Lin Qingsue didn't believe your words at all, you nearly fell to your knees before her. Last night, I went up the mountain and harvested wild dendrobium and also happened to come across a civet den. Those things were traded for 6 Datuanjie bills. I spent 1 bill to buy food, and now this is all that's left. Upon hearing about dendrobium, Lin Qingxue's eyes finally showed a glint of recognition. Ginseng in the north, dendrobium in the south. That stuff has high medicinal value and can be sold for good money. But they all grow deep in the mountains, making them incredibly hard to find. You this scumbag. But thinking carefully about it, there were indeed bloodstains by the water well when she got up this morning, and civet meat was still stewing in the pot. Could she really have blamed him wrongly? But how on earth did he recognize dendrobium? Under Lin Qingshue's watchful gaze, you raised your right hand and swore, I really didn't do anything bad. Otherwise, let me die out without descendants. Seeing your wife's breathing stabilize a bit, and her gaze turn less fierce, you let out a sigh of relief in your heart. Qingxue, hurry up and put the money away safely. I'm going to send some meat to eldest brother's family, so they can have a taste of it too. Although it would be safer to hide the money in the space, handing the money over to your wife meant handing over financial control of the household. Afterwards, you carried out a plate of stir-fried civet meat along with the stewed crucian carp and tofu soup, placing them on the table in the main room. Then you went back to the kitchen, scooped up a full bowl of meat, and walked toward your eldest brother's house. On the way, you also paid back the rice paste money you owed old man Huang, as well as the previous alcohol debt. Meanwhile, Lin Qingxue looked at the Datuanjie bills in her hand and hurriedly went back into the room. Having been married to you for over 2 years, it had always been you extorting money from her. This was the very first time you proactively handed money over. Therefore, she split the money into 5 parts and hid them in different places. Just as she finished doing this, hearing steady footsteps approaching outside, she walked out of the room. Staring at the steaming dish and soup on the table, she felt a little dazed for a moment. Then she went to the kitchen to take a look. The flour jar was more than half full. The oil jar was also full. And a slab of pork belly weighing over a dozen pounds was even hanging from the house beam. Has he really changed? At this moment, Lin Qingxue couldn't be sure. After all, a dog can't change its habit of eating feces. Seeing Lin Qingxue sit down, you placed a wild pheasant drumstick into her bowl. I'll go up the mountain first thing tomorrow morning. Before winter arrives, I need to quickly harvest all the places where dendrobium can be dug up. After all, this was currently the fastest way to make money. Once the whole country opens up, we can use the money to invest in other things. Hearing your words, Lin Qingxue froze for a moment and nodded her head, saying absolutely nothing. Even if you had pure dumb luck last night and stumbled upon a single dendrobium plant, how could you be that lucky every single time? Lin Qingxue originally wanted to remind you that if you really wanted to earn money, you should look for a job. Even if it's just a few cents a day, it's still better than having no income at all. But thinking back to your personality, as long as you didn't go out to gamble recklessly or drink alcohol, she would just let you be. Holding her chopsticks, she wanted to pick up the wild pheasant drumstick from her bowl and put it back. Seeing her like this, you quickly used the child as an excuse to stop your wife. You are too thin. Eat more, otherwise the child won't even have milk to drink. No matter how good baby formula is, it can't beat breast milk. And baby formula is expensive and hard to buy. Drinking this crucian carp and tofu soup helps produce milk. These words earned you a glare from Lin Qingxue, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her chopsticks. But she didn't refuse anymore. Today, you had been tossing and turning for a whole day and night, feeling both sleepy and exhausted. The family's livelihood problem was finally solved. After filling your stomach, you straight up said, "Wife, I'm going to sleep first." Saying this, you stood up, bent down, and went into the inner room, falling fast asleep the moment your head hit the bed. By the time Lin Qingxue finished washing the dishes and returned to the room, she saw the clothes you had taken off on the floor, her brows furrowing, and then she picked them up to wash them under the moonlight. After finishing her chores, she dragged her exhausted body back to the bedroom. Not paying attention to her steps, she kicked against the basket. Lin Qingxue picked it up to take a look, and it turned out to be a brand new set of women's clothes, along with 3 small sets of baby clothes. So she stared at you for a good while as you slept soundly. She couldn't quite understand this person anymore. This sleep of yours was absolutely deep and dead to the world. During the night, your daughter woke up twice, but she still didn't manage to wake you up at all the way until early morning. You finally opened your eyes feeling half awake and groggy. Turning over, you saw Lin Qingxue curling her body up with her back facing you. At this moment, she was only wearing a worn-out small camisole, which made you gulp down your saliva. After all, following Lin Qingxue's death in the past life, you had never looked for another woman again. Therefore, you reached out to pull her into your embrace. All of this felt as completely unreal as a dream. Just as you wanted to lower your head to give her a kiss, the body of your wife in your arms suddenly stiffened up, clearly resisting your touch very much. Thus, you forcefully suppressed the bitterness in your heart and rolled over to get out of bed. For this period of time, you could only wrong yourself a little first. Taking down your washed clothes from the clothesline, you couldn't care less that they weren't dry and swiftly slipped them on. Then, you tiptoed to take the items out of the basket and place them on the table. At this time, Lin Qingxue sat up on the bed, speaking to you with a cold face. If you truly want to reform, then find a job. As long as you're willing to work hard, you can make over 12 yuan a month, and our family's life can still be manageable. Hearing your wife proactively speak to you, joy welled up in your heart, knowing that Lin Qingshui was looking out for your well-being. But since heaven gave you a chance to live another life, you absolutely must, before the economy fully opens up, save up enough startup capital. In the previous life, after the mother and daughter passed away, you were just like a stray dog, wandering around outside for quite a few days. Later on, you met a benefactor, which gave you the opportunity to work as a waiter in a state-owned store. Because your tongue was sweet and you knew how to talk, you were gradually promoted to manager, and because of that, you got the chance to step into a higher class and come into contact with those big shots. In this lifetime, you want to rely on your own hands to earn your first pot of gold as quickly as possible. Therefore, hunting and harvesting dendrobium is the fastest way to make money right now. More crucially, you now possess the memories of your past life and know exactly in which places dendrobium can be found. How could you possibly let slip such a golden opportunity? It was just that right now, you didn't know how to explain to your wife why you insisted on going up the mountain to harvest dendrobium. Seeing that you remained silent for a long time, Lin Qingshui knew that this man's stubborn temper was flaring up again, so she simply pulled up the quilt and lay back down. There's porridge on the kitchen stove, and I also left some cornmeal buns for you. Hearing her words, you saw a face full of unhideable emotion and immediately stepped up to the bed, planting a kiss on Lin Qingshui's cheek. Wife, I already settled things with our eldest brother yesterday. You don't need to go give them a hand today. When you get some free time, send half of the pork in the kitchen over to my mother-in-law. Meanwhile, seeing you approach Lin Qingshui, thought she had provoked you and that you were going to beat her again. But she never expected to be caught off guard by your sudden kiss, and she didn't even hear clearly what you said after that. Nor did she notice you kissing your daughter before leaving. By the time she snapped out of it, you were already long gone. Inside the dim room, only she and her daughter sleeping on the small bed remained. Although it was still early, she tossed and turned, unable to fall back asleep at all. Just like that, she lay in bed until the sun shone brightly, when she suddenly heard someone outside. Knocking on the door, second sister-in-law. Is there something wrong since you're here so early? Liu Guihua's eyes rolled around scanning the inside of the kitchen, smiling with ultimate flattery. Fourth brother's wife. I heard from eldest sister-in-law that your family ate meat last night. Did your fourth brother hit the jackpot by winning at gambling? Saying this without waiting for a reply. Her feet moved as if they had eyes of their own, making a straight path toward the kitchen door. Goodness gracious. Did fourth brother go out to steal or rob? How much money must it take for such a big chunk of meat? Her own family hadn't seen a trace of meat for nearly half a year. Her kids had been clamoring for days, yet she couldn't bear to buy any. She managed to pull her eyes away with great difficulty, only to spot that on the dark wall, there was actually half a wild pheasant hanging. She instantly lost her composure. Fourth brother's wife. You really need to keep a close eye on your man. If his gambling goes wrong, he might even end up in a labor camp. Hearing her say this, Lin Qingshui's face darkened bit by bit. Second sister-in-law. What kind of words are those? If he breaks the law, the police will naturally arrest him. You don't need to waste your energy worrying about this second sister-in-law. Liu Guihua wanted to say something more, but her eyes rolled around, and as if she thought of something, she swallowed back the words that had reached her lips. Don't be annoyed with second sister-in-law. Am I not also just worried about our fourth brother? My man is his biological brother after all. My little Bao has been crying and clamoring for meat. Can you lend me 5 pounds of meat first? I'll have your second brother send you the money later. After getting along for more than 2 years, Lin Qingshui knew everything perfectly well in her heart, having long figured out what kind of person this second sister-in-law was. Once something entered her house, it was like hitting a dog with a meat bun. And asking for 5 pounds of meat right off the bat, let alone that she didn't dare make the decision to lend it. Even if she had full control over the household, it would be impossible. I can't make the decision on such a big matter. Second sister-in-law, wait for fourth brother to return and talk to him. Saying this, she walked over and locked the kitchen door. Seeing her act like this, Liu Guihua felt extremely displeased. Fine then. When fourth brother returns, remember to tell him to bring the meat over to my house. As she turned around to leave, the smile on Liu Guihua's face could no longer be maintained. Meanwhile, on the mountain, it was almost noon. Relying on those memories from your past life, it took you a great deal of effort to finally find a wild dendrobium plant. Having yesterday's experience of working in the dark, by the time most of the dendrobium's root system was exposed, it was completely uncovered. This one was much larger than yesterday's plant. It wasn't until the sky turned dark that you carefully managed to get that large piece completely out. Just as you prepared to head down the mountain and go home, you turned around and ran straight into a sika deer. It looked like it had come to nibble on the dendrobium. Seeing this, you quickly took out the hunting rifle you traded for yesterday from your space. Within a breath, a gunshot exploded in the woods, and flocks of birds scattered and fled in all directions. Meanwhile, at home, Lin Qingshui had already prepared dinner. After preparing the baby formula for her daughter, she still didn't see you return, and her brows tightly knit together. How could dendrobium be that easy to find? It's still better to have him solidly learn a trade. Just as Lin Qingshui was lost in thought, you quietly walked into the courtyard. It wasn't until you took the items out of the basket that Lin Qingshui inside the house heard the commotion. Carrying her daughter, she walked out and said, "Wash your hands and eat." After saying that, she carried her daughter back into the room. You noticed your wife cast a glance toward the basket, but she didn't say a word. When you entered the room and saw the piping hot food set out on the table, your eyes grew hot with emotion, wishing you could go back to your past life and slap yourself to death. With such a beautiful and virtuous wife, how on earth did you fail to cherish her properly? Walking over to the table, you sat down and began to wolf down the food. "Wife, I'm going to the village chief's house in a bit. We'll get our house hooked up to the electricity lines in the next few days." Hearing this, Lin Qingshui's hand patting the baby paused for a moment, and she couldn't help but speak up. "Getting electricity connected. That means we'll have to pay electricity bills every month from now on." After saying that, she secretly peeked at you, terrified that she might provoke you into flipping the table. You sharply caught Lin Qingshui's expression, so you immediately put down your chopsticks, walked to the door, and carried the basket into the room. "Wife, this is what I dug up today. When I go to the pharmacy in the city another day to sell it, it should bring in a pretty good price." Lin Qingshu stared straight at that dendrobium plant. She lifted her eyes to look at you, asking in a tone of utter disbelief, "Did you really dig this up yourself?" Seeing this, you continued to explain, "I swear I didn't steal or rob. This really is a result of me digging in the mountains all day long." Seeing your completely unbothered face, Lin Qingshu finally nodded her head half-believingly. "Our second sister-in-law came over during the day. She wanted to borrow 5 pounds of pork." Seeing Lin Qingshu pulling a long face, she was obviously unhappy. You guessed that while you weren't at home, second sister-in-law must have given her a hard time. Therefore, you said with a serious expression, "You call the shots in this house from now on. The money and the goods are all yours to keep. If you don't want to lend it, then we won't." Hearing these words, Lin Qingshui felt hesitant in her heart. After pondering for a good while, she finally said in a soft, timid voice, "I don't want to lend it to second sister-in-law. She says it's borrowing, but she will definitely never return it. It's not the first time she borrowed something from our house and didn't return it." Hearing Lin Qingshui's words, a relieved and gratified smile appeared on your face, and you dotingly pinched her nose. "If you don't want to lend it, then we won't. We won't take any of her attitude." Your smile left Lin Qingshui completely dazed. Then she picked up her daughter and stood up to go into the inner room while you, after filling your stomach, washed the dishes and chopsticks clean. Then you cut half a pound of meat and walked out to the door in the dark. When the village chief Wang Xuanzhu saw it was you, his dark weathered face froze for a moment. But upon spotting the meat in your hand, the wrinkles all over his face creased into a wide smile. "Zhenguo, what brings you to see your uncle so late?" he asked while taking the meat from your hand. "I want to install an electric light at home. Can you find some time to help arrange it?" "Sure. I'll arrange this matter for you tomorrow." Hearing his words, you didn't overstay your welcome. You stood up, expressed your thanks, turned around and left. But as you walked past the kitchen, you actually saw Lin Qingshui in the pitch-black kitchen, gnawing on those leftover meat bones that you had eaten. The scene pierced your eyes with agonizing pain, and the blood throughout your entire body felt as if it had completely frozen. Then in a hoarse voice you said, "What are you doing?" Hearing your voice, Lin Qingshui shuddered with fear, and the bone at her mouth fell straight to the ground. Immediately, she looked out at you in the courtyard with a face full of terror. "Don't beat me. These are all your leftovers. I just thought it would be a shame to throw them away." Yan. Yi. At this moment, you felt as if you were struck by a bolt from the blue, having never felt so defeated. With a thud, you instantly fell to your knees before her. Meanwhile, Lin Qingshui was so frightened that she screamed out at the top of her lungs, "What do you want to do?" Lin Qingshui's eyelids lowered slightly, looking down at the man kneeling in front of her. It wasn't until she felt her chest soaked by a wet warmth, realizing that he was actually crying. Her long closed heart seemed to loosen up just a little bit. Seeing your wife get so terrified, just from eating your leftovers, it felt exactly like a knife being fiercely plunged into your heart. Therefore, you stood up from the ground, cupped your wife's pale cheeks, and lowered your head to kiss away the tears from the corners of her eyes. "Wife, go wait in the main room. In a bit, when the food is ready, I'll carry it in. You are my greatest benefactor." Lin Qingshu didn't understand the meaning behind these words and slipped out of the kitchen in a blush as if she had seen a ghost. Inside the kitchen, you busied yourself for a short while, and a plate of savory, fragrant stir-fried sliced meat came out of the wok. The coarse-grained buns that you thought scraped your throat, your wife nonetheless cherished so much that she couldn't bear to waste a single bite. But just as you stepped into the inner room, a view of a beautiful snow-white back met your eyes. In an instant, blood rushed straight to your lower abdomen. Unable to hold back, you wrapped your arms around her from behind, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Wife, never leave me again." Amid the passion, Lin Qingshui felt for the very first time that doing this kind of thing could actually be such a comfortable and pleasurable experience. This was the first time since their wedding night that the two of them slept together so deeply in love. Thinking about the scene from last night, Lin Qingshu felt her cheeks burning with heat, turning her face when she looked over at the child on the small bed. Lin Qingshu's face instantly turned deathly pale with fright. Last night, it seemed she hadn't heard her daughter cry even once during the entire night. Noticing your wife's sudden change of expression, with her eyes staring fixedly toward your daughter's side, you swiftly got out of bed, rushing over to your daughter's small bed in a few steps. Seeing that your daughter was already awake, staring with her two large eyes and smiling, your heart completely melted at this moment as you looked at your little girl. You carefully held your daughter in your arms and walked back to the bedside, seeing that her daughter was perfectly fine and even grinning. The heavy stone in Lin Qingshui's heart finally dropped to the ground, and her taut nerves relaxed as well. Right after her eyes turned red and she almost cried out, feeling annoyed with herself for how she could have slept so heavily last night. With a child this small, if anything went wrong, how could she possibly go on living? Wife, lie down with New for a bit longer. I'm going to make breakfast for you. Saying this, you scooped up your underwear thrown on the floor and slipped it straight on. Meanwhile, Lin Qingshui checked under her daughter's bottom at the cloth diaper she was resting on. Although it wasn't tucked in very neatly, it had indeed been changed to a clean one. No wonder she didn't hear her daughter crying last night. It turned out this scoundrel had gotten up to take care of their daughter. This was the very first time since the baby was born that he proactively took care of the child. So has he really changed? Can she really trust him one more time? On the other side, you were skillfully busying yourself in the kitchen. By the time your wife came out carrying the child, the food was already prepared. Tofu with baby bok choy, cornmeal porridge along with coarse grain buns. Bare-chested, you took the child from Lin Qingshui's arms. Wife, go wash up first. Lin Qingshui felt a little uneasy, but watching you clumsily and awkwardly, holding such a tiny baby, she burst out laughing with a pfft. This is your own daughter, not a tiger. It's not like she can bite you or anything. While eating, the village chief Wang Xuanzhu arrived with the electrician. The moment they entered the courtyard, they spotted Lin Qingshui sitting by the table in the courtyard having her meal, while you walked around the courtyard bare-chested holding the baby. He caught sight of a neat set of teeth marks on the inner side of your arm, smiling meaningfully. Zhengguo, you haven't even finished your meal yet? You didn't expect Wang Xuanzhu to find someone so early. You then led the village chief and the electrician to the entrance outside the courtyard to chat. After Lin Qingshui finished her meal and went back inside, you finally handed the baby over to your wife. Right after, from the pocket of your loose shorts, you fished out a pack of Dakianmen cigarettes. Looking at the Dakianmen cigarette in his hand, the village chief grinned with his yellow teeth and said, "You rascal, you've made something of yourself. A pack of this stuff costs 40 cents. The electrician beside him smiled even more simple-mindedly. He tucked the cigarette behind his ear, shouldered the ladder, and walked around to the back of the house. This job was well worth it. He usually couldn't bear to smoke cigarettes that cost 40 cents a pack, yet this family was quite generous. Once the electricity was connected, you went back into the house. Just as you walked in, a piece of clothing flew straight at your face. Before you could figure out what was going on, you heard Lin Qingshui say, "Hurry up and put your clothes on." Then you heard Lin Qingshui say, "Hurry up and put your clothes on." What kind of manner is it to walk around bare-chested like that? At this moment, there were a few more scratch marks on your back. Those were left by Lin Qingshui last night. The village chief and the electrician both saw them but didn't say it out loud, while you knew absolutely nothing about it. Walking around everywhere with a bare chest, this made Lin Qingshui feel so utterly embarrassed that she wished she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. With outsiders around, she felt too shy to remind you. It wasn't until after you went up the mountain that Lin Qingshui covered her burning cheeks, taking a good while to calm herself down. Only then did she proceed to take off the bedding to wash it. She moved the child's small bed into the courtyard, placed the child inside, and filled the basin with water, preparing to wash the bedding. At that time, Mother Lin came over carrying a basket which contained some eggs and a small piece of meat. Spotting her mother, Lin Qingshui hurriedly wiped her hands and stood up. "Mom, what brings you here?" Mother Lin carried the basket in her hand into the kitchen, her gaze shifting back and forth over her daughter. Looking at her worn-out and ill-fitting clothes, her eyes grew sore with emotion, and she quickly turned her gaze away, bending over the small bed to look at her granddaughter, saying, "We just finished up our work at home, so I came over to see you." As she spoke, her eyes swept over the 3 dilapidated mud and thatch rooms. In her heart, she was regretting this every single moment. She shouldn't have agreed to this marriage, as she had completely ruined her daughter's life. Qingshui mom has thought it over. If you really can't go on living with him, then get a divorce. You are still young and your life is still long. Your whole life cannot be ruined at the hands of a scumbag like him. Hearing her own mother's words, Lin Qingshui was first taken aback. Sitting on the stool, she didn't utter a word for quite a while. That day, you snatched away the money she borrowed from her maternal home to buy rice paste for their daughter just to buy alcohol. She truly felt completely driven to despair. She felt that being with you offered absolutely no hope at all, and even thoughts of dying had popped into her head. At that time, she wanted to hold her daughter and jump into the reservoir. But after you sobered up from the alcohol, you were first full of remorse, slapping yourself in the face over a dozen times, and then flurriedly rushed out the door to buy rice paste for the child. Over the past few days, she noticed you seemed to have truly become a changed person. You didn't go out to fool around anymore. you stopped drinking alcohol, and you stopped gambling altogether. Seeing her daughter keeping her head down and remaining silent, Mother Lin thought she was worried about the child, so she spoke up. If you want to take the child with you, I can help support you and raise her together in the future. Speaking up to this point, she hesitated for a moment. It's just that if you bring a child with you in the future, it won't be easy to remarry. In this day and age, those who divorced were few and far between. No matter how bitter or difficult life was, a woman still had to grit her teeth and drag herself through it. Hearing that her own mother had even fully thought through the matter of her remarrying after a divorce, Lin Qingxue took the child from her mother's arms. Mom, I don't want a divorce right now. He seems to be slowly changing for the better these days. As she spoke, she tugged at the child's brand new little clothes. These are the clothes he earned money to buy for the baby, and he bought a set for me as well, though I couldn't bear to wear it yet. Ikya. Mother Lin stared at her daughter's fair and youthful face, which was flushed with a glow that hadn't been seen in a long time, and her eyes also seemed to light up with hope once again. She couldn't help but be dazed for a moment. She had clearly just overheard by chance yesterday Ermazi from next door saying that you owed outsiders 50 yuan. With such a huge debt and you not doing any proper work, how could it be paid back? Precisely because of this, she felt uneasy and carried some things over early in the morning to check on her. But looking at her daughter's expression, it didn't seem to be fake. Even if he really turned over a new leaf, she would find a way regarding this money, even if she had to smash her pots and sell the iron to help him pay it back. Thinking up to this point, she didn't tell her daughter what she had overheard, fearing that she might throw a tantrum with you because of it. Collecting her thoughts, she nodded with relief, her eyes turning red. It's good if he can change for the better, then Mom can finally stop worrying. Saying this, she raised her hand to wipe away the tears flowing from the corners of her eyes. At this moment, having just gone up the mountain with a coarse-grained bun in your mouth, you are calculating roughly how much money it would take to build a 2-story building right now. Based on the value of the dendrobium you can currently dig up, after building the house, you would still have a sum of savings that would be considered highly substantial for this era. After all, at this time, even 10,000 yuan households are few and far between. Thinking that you will definitely have to stay and live in the village for the next 2 years, you want to upgrade the living conditions first. The 3 dilapidated mud brick rooms the family currently lives in make you feel like you can't even straighten your waist with your height after entering the house, and the dust inside is incredibly thick, flaking off everywhere. It's truly not a place meant for humans to live. At this time, you have absolutely no idea that your mother-in-law is currently discussing with your wife the matter of whether or not to get a divorce. If you were to find out about this, you probably wouldn't even have the mind to go up the mountain to dig dendrobium lately. After all, having lived another life, making money is very important in your heart. But nothing is more important than your wife and child. You hold the money-making secrets from your previous life, so you naturally aren't in a rush for this single moment. Seeing that it's almost noon, Mother Lin is in a hurry to head back home without even bothering to eat, deeply afraid that if she takes one extra bite, her daughter will have one less bite to eat. Lin Qingxue can't stop her no matter what, so she has no choice but to take down the hanging meat from the kitchen, slice off more than half of it with a knife, and chase after her while carrying it. Mom, take this back for my younger brother, my sister-in-law, and the others to eat. Seeing such a large piece of meat, Mother Lin waves her hand repeatedly and refuses to take it. Deeply afraid that if you find out she is subsidizing her maternal family like this, you will beat her daughter again. She is even more afraid that her daughter won't have enough to eat and will suffer grievances. You guys keep it and eat it. The family doesn't lack this single bite. Look at how thin you are. You need to nourish yourself more. Otherwise, where will the milk for the child come from? In the end, Mother Lin still doesn't take that piece of meat, walking away step by step with her basket on her arm. Lin Qingxue stands at the doorway, helplessly watching her mother walk further and further away, her eyes turning red as tears silently streamed down her face, feeling a deep ache in her heart. It wasn't until she could no longer see her that she turned around and went into the kitchen carrying the meat. Zhang Guilan from next door was about the same age as Lin Qingxue, but had married into the village 2 years earlier than her. She had dark skin, and gnawing on a raw radish, she leaned over the top of the wall. Sister, you don't go out all day, but word has already spread outside. Your second sister-in-law got taught a lesson by your second brother last night. Several households heard her crying and screaming. Lin Qingxue, walking out from the kitchen, sat on a stool in this courtyard, giving casual responses back and forth. Seeing that she didn't have much to say, Zhang Guilan pulled over a stool and sat down right in front of her laundry basin, lowering her volume to whisper in a low voice. Everyone outside is spreading rumors that the oldest child of your second brother's family isn't actually your second brother's. Hearing these words, Lin Qingxue instantly stopped the chore in her hand, lifting her head to look at Zhang Guilan. It's your eldest brother's child. Spotting the confusion in her eyes, Zhang Guilan stuffed the remaining radish into her pocket, whispering the gossip into her ear with a face full of excitement. After listening to it all, Lin Qingxue was completely stunned. She truly couldn't believe such a thing could happen. She used to respect this eldest brother quite a lot, thinking he was honest, loyal, fair in his dealings, and really carried himself like an older brother. But hearing about this matter made her feel somewhat disgusted in her heart. How could things be like this? Zhang Guilan seemed very satisfied with her reaction. She patted this young wife from the city. All right, I need to go home and cook for my man, so I won't chat with you anymore. That night, you returned home very late. Returning this time, you saw the bright light from your home from far away and couldn't help but sigh with emotion in your heart. This electric light is indeed much brighter than a sheep tallow lamp. Seeing you return, Lin Qingshui hurriedly brought out the dishes kept warm in the pot and the white flour buns, asking casually, "Why did you come back so late today?" Noticing that your clothes were covered in some dirt, she set down the dishes and reached out to brush it off for you. You quickly stopped her, turned around to bolt the door of the main room, and then pulled something out from under the pile of grass in the basket, carefully placing it on the table, aside from the dendrobium. This was an unexpected harvest found on the way back. You didn't tell your wife that it was because your foot slipped, and you fell down that you stumbled upon this thing, taking quite a bit of effort to climb back up, which was why you returned so late. The price of this item right now is not any lower than dendrobium, as it's all sold by the ounce, meaning you unexpectedly made a small fortune. You are planning to have a good intimate time with your wife tonight and won't go up the mountain tomorrow, opting to get rid of the goods on hand first. Lin Qingshui looked at that dark brown, ginger-shaped object he placed on the table. She seemed to have seen this in a book before, asking with uncertainty, "Is this Foti root?" Her tone carried a hint of utter disbelief. You didn't expect your wife to be so knowledgeable? Even now, most people in the village still don't know how precious this stuff is. Otherwise, with so many good treasures on the mountain, people would have scoured it completely clean long ago. Dendrobium and Foti root will remain precious for another decade or so. Later on, as cultivation technology improves, these can all be grown artificially, becoming common on the market and no longer rare. But even so, the price of wild, rare medicinal herbs will still remain absurdly high, because wild ones simply won't be available for purchase. Grinning with a mouthful of white teeth, you pulled your pretty wife into your embrace with one arm, lowering your head to plant a kiss on her fair, tender cheek. Meeting her pair of bright, sparkling eyes, you said, "Yes, it's exactly Foti root. Tomorrow your man will take you and the baby to the city for a stroll, and will sell these treasures to the pharmacy along the way." The moment she heard about taking the baby out, Lin Qingshui's body suddenly stiffened, remembering that he had previously mentioned selling their daughter to a city family that couldn't conceive. She still felt terrified to this day. Who knows if they really couldn't conceive, or if they were buying her to be a child bride. She broke away from your embrace, refusing with defensiveness and alertness. "Our daughter is still small, so the two of us won't go. Hurry up, wash your hands, and eat." With your sharp eyes, you noticed something was wrong with your wife. You originally wanted to take her out for a stroll and buy her some winter clothes along the way. But seeing her grow alert and guarded again, she was clearly afraid that you were planning something bad against your daughter. With all those scumbag things you had done before, how could it be that easy for her to let go of her trauma? Her trust in you had long been completely bankrupted. You could only take things slow. Taking off your dirt-stained shirt, you opened the door, walked out to give your face a quick wash, and came back inside to sit down. Only then did you notice the dishes on the table, a plate of golden scrambled eggs, and a small plate of leftover stir-fried meat from this morning. Did she really not eat any dishes for lunch? If she keeps skimping on food and living like this, when on Earth will you be able to nourish her back to health? It looks like you need to quickly make more money so that she can feel secure in her heart. Wife, where did these eggs come from? Lin Qingshui lowered her head to scoop a bowl of porridge for you. Not long after you left, my mom came over. She brought them. She didn't mention a single word about her mother bringing up the divorce. Hearing that it was brought by your mother-in-law, and thinking about how you used to demand money from her for alcohol, you felt too deeply ashamed to face her, so you didn't ask what brought your mother-in-law over. You calculated in your heart that once you sell the goods on hand tomorrow, you must first pay back the money you took from your mother-in-law before. You reached out to pull your wife over and made her sit down, hurry up and eat, handing her a mixed grain bun as you spoke. Your wife still couldn't bear to steam pure white flour buns, opting instead for the mixed grain ones made with half white flour. You, on the other hand, picked up a cornmeal bun and began to wolf it down. Lin Qingshui took a small bite of the mixed grain bun, lifting her head to secretly observe the man in front of her. How wonderful would it be if he could always stay like this? It's just that she doesn't know how long this sudden burst of goodness of yours will last. While the two of you were eating, a voice shouting at the door echoed from outside. "Fourth brother, come on out, you bastard! We're one person short. The brothers are waiting for you to drink and play cards." Hearing this voice, Lin Qingshu's face instantly turned deathly pale. Her eyes stared straight at you, terrified that you would be just like before, following them out to drink and gamble. Hearing this voice, you froze for a moment and immediately remembered who it was. Putting down your chopsticks and lifting your head, you saw your wife's pale little face and quickly stood up to pull her into your arms. "Wife, what's wrong? Where does it hurt?" Your tone was filled with worry and nervousness. Being held in your embrace, Lin Qingshui's slender pale fingers tightly gripped the small camisole on your chest, her lips trembling slightly. Are you going out to drink and play cards with them again? Hearing these words, you finally understood why your wife was acting like this. It turned out she was afraid your old habits were flaring up again. Resting your chin on the top of her soft hair, your arms unconsciously tightened, holding her just a bit closer. The body in your arms felt incredibly frail and thin. Since marrying you, she hadn't lived a single day of good life, and even eating a full meal had become a luxury. But even so, she still held onto a glimmer of hope for you, wanting to live a down-to-earth life with you. Taking a deep breath, you forcefully forced back the hot tears in your eyes, using a low, raspy voice to comfort her. Don't worry, I'm not going. I'll go chase them away right now. I won't fool around with them ever again. Sitting sideways in your arms, Lin Qingshui, after hearing your words, lifted her face and stared straight at you with a scrutinizing gaze, demanding, are you really not going? Lowering your eyelids, you met your wife's anxious and searching, eyes wishing you could rip your heart out to show her and tell her that you had truly turned over a new leaf. Unable to help yourself, you planted another kiss on her cute nose, breathing out your clean warm breath, promising, I'm really not going. Don't worry, I'll tell them to get lost right now. Afterward, you gently set your wife back down onto the stool. All right, you go ahead and keep eating. I'll be right back. You straightened your back and found that the small camisole on your chest was still tightly clutched in your wife's hand. If you didn't already know that those three guys outside were complete scum, you would really want to take her outside with you so she could watch you reject them, just to give her total peace of mind. You lowered your head and kissed the top of her hair once more, as a form of comfort while your rough, warm, large hand gently patted her frail back. Only then did she slowly let go of her grip. You straightened up and walked over with vigorous large strides. Arriving at the courtyard entrance, you opened the wooden door. When the people at the door saw you come out, that guy named Erliuzzi smiled in a completely rogue and raspy manner, making a dirty joke as he said, Fourth brother, you're being real unfair here. Your wife just finished her postpartum recovery period not long ago, and you can't even get out of bed. It's been so many days, yet you haven't come to drink with your brothers. Hearing those wretched words, your sharp eyebrows filled with fierce anger. Your whole body roared, damn it, keep your mouth clean when you speak from now on. If you don't know how to speak, then shut your stinking mouth for me. The other two had originally been laughing along playfully, but seeing that your expression was off, they instantly wiped the smiles off their faces. They quickly tried to smooth things over, saying, Fourth brother, he's just a big-mouthed idiot. Don't hold it against him. Come on, let's go drink together. Saying this, one reached out, preparing to drape an arm over your shoulder. You slapped away the arm he extended towards you, casting a sidelong glance at the other two. If it's about drinking and playing cards, don't ever come looking for me from now on. I've quit. Seeing your fierce posture, the three of them looked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at each other, completely dumbfounded. That guy named Erliuzzi still had a wretched, vulgar smile plastered on his face, courting death as he continued to tease. Fourth brother, are you really being tied down by your young wife so much that you can't get out of bed? Since she's already out of her recovery month, why don't you let us brothers have a taste too? Before he could even finish his sentence, you sent a fierce kick straight toward him, kicking him square in the chest, sending him flying backward with his legs in the air, leaving him groaning on the ground. Taking a huge stride forward, you stepped right between that guy's legs, bending down with a fierce glint flashing in your dark eyes, staring straight at the scumbag on the ground. If you dare to spout filth from your mouth again, I will sew both of your lips shut and then break your third leg. As you spoke, your foot pressed down even harder. Erliuzzi lay on the ground, ignoring the sharp pain in his chest, using both hands to desperately push against your massive foot, stepping on his crotch, wailing at the top of his lungs, Fourth brother, I was wrong. I will never talk nonsense again. The other two beside him were scared out of their wits by this scene, completely speechless for a long moment. Your entire body was radiating a murderous aura, looking incredibly terrifying in the dark of the night, and absolutely no one dared to step forward to break up the fight. Since they were kids, they had always been afraid of this guy. When it came to fighting, he was a ruthless character who didn't care about his own life. But today was the very first time they saw him look like a starving tiger ready to devour a human, just from moving his body, sending a cold shiver down their spines. You were afraid that Erliuzzi's loud screaming might draw your wife out. You didn't want your wife to see this violent side of you, lest it scare her. If she became afraid of you again because of this piece of shit matter, then everything would be completely ruined. You straightened your body, glaring down at Erliuzzi on the ground from a high vantage point, and pulled your foot back, get lost. The other two felt as if they had been granted a grand amnesty. They quickly hoisted Erliuzzi up and said to you, Fourth brother, then we'll take our leave first. As soon as the three of them left, you immediately reined in that fierce aura. You walked back into the courtyard and slid the door bolt shut. Inside the room, Lin Qingshui, ever since you walked out, had been restless with anxiety, feeling like she was sitting on a bed of needles, finding every single second agonizingly difficult to pass. Seeing that you hadn't come back for a long time, her heart had almost turned completely cold. Clearly her stomach was rumbling with hunger. But looking at the piping hot food on the table, since you weren't there, she couldn't swallow a single bite. In just these few days of time, watching you change for the better bit by bit, hope had unconsciously ignited in her heart for you once again. She didn't even count on him achieving great wealth and status. She just hoped he could live a stable, peaceful life, and that would be enough. But if he ran off to drink and gamble again, what on earth was she supposed to do? The child was still so small, and there was absolutely no way she could bring her along to work outside. Could it be that she really had to get a divorce? Just as she was lost in thought, she heard a steady set of footsteps. Her eyes unconsciously darted toward the direction where the sound was coming from. She saw your tall, large figure walking in from beneath the moonlight. At this moment, Lin Qingshui's originally lifeless eyes suddenly lit up with a spark of light. He actually didn't go out to fool around with those few scumbags after all. While she was still in a daze, you had already walked up behind her. Bending down, you wrapped her into your broad embrace, lowering your head to plant a kiss on your wife's fair, tender cheek. What's wrong? Your man just stepped out for a brief moment, and you don't recognize me anymore. As you spoke, you handed the chopsticks into her hand, sat down in front of the table, picked up a cornmeal bun, and began to wolf it down in huge bites. Lin Qingshu still couldn't completely process what was happening, subconsciously asking, "Are you really never going to mess around with them again in the future?" Reporting to my lady wife, "I have completely cut ties with them, and I won't hang out with them ever again." Only then did Lin Qingshui nod her head, beginning to eat her meal in an unhurried, graceful manner. While eating, she would peek at her man from time to time, seeing that you ate very quickly. Yet, your table manners weren't bad at all. Coupled with your sharp, well-defined, handsome face, it actually became quite pleasing to the eye. Back then, aside from the fact that he had saved her life, marrying him was actually partly because he looked so sharp and handsome. She was truly blinded by his outer appearance at that time. Coupled with the fact that she had to exchange a marriage for her younger brother, she ended up marrying you, who were completely penniless. Seeing your wife staring at you in a daze, you didn't know what her little brain was pondering over again. You placed a piece of golden scrambled egg onto her bun, grinning as you teased her, "Wife, hurry up and eat. I'll let you look your fill on the bed in a bit." Your nonsensical words snapped Lin Qingshui back to reality. Looking at your playful, roguish demeanor, she gave you a fierce rolling glare, then lowered her blushing face to bury herself in her food. Having eaten your fill, you weren't in a hurry to leave either. Squeezed onto a cramped little wooden stool, your eyes stared straight at your wife. The more you looked, the more you loved her. Even though resources were scarce in this era, the food was poor and there were barely any cosmetics. Her skin remained incredibly smooth and radiant, looking even more beautiful than those celebrities who get injections. You noticed that the hand your wife used to hold the chopsticks had bright red knuckles, so you grabbed her slender wrist and pulled it right before your eyes. Thinking about the bed sheets hanging out to dry outside, you planned to sell the goods on hand tomorrow and get a washing machine voucher from the black market. In this era, many people still didn't even know what a washing machine was, let alone being willing to spend money to buy one. Once you had a washing machine, your wife wouldn't have to scrub clothes by hand anymore. Lin Qingshui pulled her hand back, feeling thoroughly embarrassed by your intense staring. "Since you're full, go boil some water and wash up. You're covered in mud." You stood up and planted a kiss on your wife's face, before heading to the kitchen to boil water. After you left Lin Qingshui, put down her chopsticks and touched her burning cheeks. Ever since last night, this man seemed to love hugging and holding her all the time, even stealing a couple of kisses from time to time. Every time he drew near, she could smell the masculine scent on him, making her heart race like a trapped rabbit, thumping wildly. She couldn't even understand what was happening to herself. After finishing the meal, you pulled Lin Qingshui along, saying you wanted to take her out for a walk, to help digest the food. On the way back, you didn't head toward your house, but led Lin Qingshui to turn in another direction, toward a dilapidated mud shack right next to the cowshed. A simple dirt stove was set up outside, and the woman inside the house kept coughing while clutching her chest. She grabbed a small handful of corn grits, mixed it with water, and put it into a chipped ceramic pot. Just walking these few steps made large pale beads of sweat appear on her face and roll down from her forehead. While she was in distress, a man with half-white hair walked over with large strides from not far away. Frowning, he took the water ladle from her and told her to go back into the house and lie down properly, saying he would cook the food himself. The woman looked at him, and the man handed over a half piece of flatbread he had bartered for. "Luck was pretty good today. I traded for a piece of flatbread. I ate half and brought back the rest. Hurry up and eat. You'll get over your illness faster once you eat. Have you really eaten?" Without the slightest hesitation, the man added a handful of grains to the pot, squatted down to start the fire, and said, "Yes, I've eaten." Thinking about her own condition, the woman handed the flatbread back. "I'm not hungry. You should eat it all. I've been lying down all day, so I just want to drink something watery." Baring his head to light the fire, the man said, "Eat when I tell you to eat. How can your illness get better if you don't eat?" The man kept his head down, his eyes stinging with tears. If they filled their stomachs today, what would they eat tomorrow? She didn't care about her own body. That tiny bit of grains was bartered only after he begged several villager families. She felt sorry that he busied himself all day without eating, and he felt sorry that she followed him to the countryside to suffer. He grasped her hand. Don't think so much. Just focus on recovering from your illness. Tomorrow, I will go find medicine for you, and it will definitely cure you. Lin Qingshu felt deeply uncomfortable watching this, asking you about the situation of those two on the way back. You remained somewhat silent. How should you explain it? You weren't familiar with that man either, but you had seen him on television in your previous life. The old man dominated the business world for many years, and after his passing, he donated his entire fortune, under his wife's name, to establish a public welfare medical rescue foundation. The greatest regret of his life was failing to protect his love, watching her pass away under the torture of illness with his own eyes. Based on your memories, you guess that what caused his wife's death should be this very illness. However, you estimate that Madame Yin's illness is mainly caused by malnutrition. In a drafty cowshed with nothing but clear soup and watery food every day, even the smallest ailment could drag out into a fatal disease. You plan to have your high schooler wife take the medicine and food to them and use the money on hand to invest in this future tycoon. At the very least, you'll secure a tutor before the college entrance examination resumes. Early the next morning, before it was even light, you opened your eyes as you lay there, quietly got out of bed, walked over to the small bed, and cautiously picked up your daughter. Gently placing her beside your wife, you carefully tucked them in with the small blanket. After cooking breakfast for your wife, you shut the door from the outside and set out on your journey. Today happened to be the market day. Although it was still early, there were already quite a few pedestrians on the road. In this day and age, in the countryside, if a family could own a 28-inch bicycle, their financial condition would be considered quite excellent. Therefore, most people still had to rely on their two legs to walk when going out. Relying on the memories of your previous life, you instantly found that relatively large, traditional Chinese medicine shop. The middle-aged man with a square face, seeing the items you brought out, sized you up from head to toe, then picked up the dendrobium and examined it very thoroughly. Seeing that this dendrobium was actually iron-skin dendrobium, with every single stalk perfectly intact, he couldn't help but feel a bit surprised in his heart. He carefully placed the dendrobium on the counter and asked probing fees to see what price you wanted to sell it for. Hearing him ask for a quote, you didn't hold back and directly stated a figure. You knew in your heart that the other party would definitely haggle. And as expected, the moment the pharmacy manager heard your price, he immediately knew what to do. Knowing that this guy wasn't easy to fool, he glanced at your basket and invited you into the backyard. The two of you stayed in the backyard, haggling back and forth for nearly an hour. In the end, you sold him 2 stalks of dendrobium, 1 piece of foti root, and the deer antler. You were quite satisfied with the price today, leaving the pharmacy with 50 10 yuan bills stuffed in your pocket. Now that you had money, you headed straight to the state-owned department store. You wanted to buy a washing machine, but the salesperson's reply left you completely dumbfounded. You slapped your forehead. Although washing machines exist now, they are all used for hotels and laundromats, and haven't entered ordinary households yet. The first domestic washing machine won't be produced until 1978, so it hasn't even been manufactured yet. However, you unexpectedly managed to get a hold of a voucher for a 9-inch black and white television. Without a second thought, you bought it right away. You also bought some stamps, meat vouchers, and flour vouchers. The black market dealers saw that a big spender had arrived and were exceptionally enthusiastic towards you. Hearing that you wanted to buy the TV on the very same day, they helped find an acquaintance who owned a tractor, who could haul the items back to the village for you for just 2 yuan. Without thinking twice, you agreed. Next, at the state-owned department store, you bought your wife a solid bright red sweater, pants, and leather shoes. You also got several sets of brand new little clothes for the baby, along with a few new cotton quilts. You bought everything you could think of, filling up almost half of the tractor. The master driving the tractor was left staring open-mouthed, unable to believe that a young lad dressed in such worn-out clothes could be this rich, buying so many things all in one go. By the time you finished your massive shopping spree, it was already afternoon. Meanwhile, back at home, Lin Qingshui woke up in the morning and saw the child sleeping right beside her, while you had already left at some unknown time. Lin Qingshui dragged her heavy, sore body out of bed. She noticed that before that man left early in the morning, he had already prepared all the food perfectly. On the table sat golden orange scrambled eggs, along with pieces of meat fried to a sizzling juicy perfection. To say that Lin Qingshui felt no emotion in her heart would be a complete lie. Around noon, Wang Xuanzhu led a radiant young girl through the door. Old Fourth's wife. This is Li Tiantian, an educated youth from the city. She will be staying at your house from now on. Just let Old Fourth know and clean a room out for her. Lin Qingshui was completely stunned for a moment. With a young girl suddenly added to the house, how could these 3 small mud brick rooms accommodate everyone? One room was occupied by the couple. The main room was where they ate, and the other room was piled with all sorts of random things. Where was there any space for her to live? Village chief, he is not at home, so I can't make this decision. Wang Xuanzhu smiled until the wrinkles on his face bunched together. He waved his hand at Lin Qingshui, completely ignoring her words. turned to give a few instructions to the educated youth beside him, and walked away with large strides. If it weren't out of consideration for the piece of meat that lad had given him, how could he possibly send such a beautiful unmarried young girl to his house? Among this batch of educated youth that came down, there were over 20 people in total, mostly strong and vigorous young lads. He had specially arranged for this one delicate little girl to stay here. Since the young couple lived here, sending a little girl was always better than sending a young lad. After all, when doing chores at night, having a girl around was much more convenient than a boy, with nothing to complain about, and he wouldn't have to worry about a young, beautiful wife being eyed by someone else. Left behind, Li Tiantian carried her canvas shoulder bag and sized up these 3 dilapidated mudrooms, her heart instantly filling with bitter misery. The days ahead would likely be much harder to endure than for the other educated youth in the countryside. The family Hong Mei was assigned to looked like they were living a very prosperous life. It was a middle-aged couple with 3 kids, each and every one of them dressed bright and neat. On the way here, she heard them say that the family she was assigned to was notorious for having a shiftless rogue. The man was not a good guy at all. He drank, gambled, and even beat his wife. The family was dirt poor, scarcely able to put food on the table. Before arriving, she thought they were exaggerating a bit. But looking at it now, what they said wasn't fabricated at all, except for the female head of this household. She wore worn-out, ill-fitting clothes, but she was incredibly radiant and beautiful, with delicate facial features like someone stepping out of a painting, looking nothing like a villager at all. Lin Qingyue noticed that gaze sizing her up thoroughly. She lowered her head to look at herself, wearing old clothes covered in patches, then looked at the girl in front of her who was fashionably dressed in a dacron skirt, white socks, and small leather shoes, looking bright and beautiful. She pretended not to notice that scrutinizing look and spoke up, "Have a seat first. That room is a complete mess, filled with all sorts of random things. We have to wait for my man to come back before we can clear out a space for you." After saying this, she turned and went into the house, bringing out a thermos to pour a bowl of water for the guest. Li Tiantian nodded somewhat uneasily and sat down on a wooden stool in the courtyard. She calculated in her heart that she had to do everything possible to quickly get a notice to return to the city for work. She didn't want to spend a single extra day in this miserable place, especially since she was staying in the house of a local thug and rogue. She would have to be very careful in the future not to let the thug of this family take advantage of her. Lin Qingxiu originally planned to just throw together a casual meal for lunch, but now that a new educated youth had arrived, she had no choice but to roll up her sleeves and start preparing food. Li Tiantian thought about how she would be living here from now on, so she couldn't just eat and live for free. Thus she washed her hands and entered the kitchen, wanting to help. "Sister, how about I stoke the stove?" As she spoke and walked into the kitchen, she froze. The dilapidated kitchen was actually cleaned very neat and tidy, and there was such a massive piece of meat hanging from the roof beam. Who on earth said this family was too poor to put food on the table? How could someone unable to put food on the table afford to eat meat? And such a large piece at that. Lin Qingxiu was lowering her head to knead dough. Hearing Li Tiantian's words, she lifted her head and said, "No need for your help. If you have nothing to do, just help me watch the baby in the courtyard." Hearing this, Li Tiantian nodded and left the kitchen. Coming in front of the small bed, she looked at the baby lying there, who was as fair and clean as a porcelain doll, looking equally lovable. She bent down to play with her, feeling puzzled in her heart. This female head of the house was about the same age as her, and grew up looking so fair and beautiful. But why did she get married so early? How could she fancy such a worthless man, who was even a local thug and rogue? Could it be that she was forced by that rogue, and married him because she had no choice? At the thought of this, Li Tiantian felt a wave of bitter misery. The more she pondered, the more afraid she became, wondering if she should go to the village chief's house and beg him to change her to another place, even if it was a bit poorer. As long as the man of that family was an honest person, it would do. In the kitchen, Lin Qingxue was busy cooking, having no idea that the educated youth outside was playing out such a big drama in her head. Before long, a bowl of steaming hot noodles was ready. Lin Qingxue walked out carrying the noodles and greeted female comrade. "Come have a bowl of noodles first." Li Tiantian snapped out of her thoughts, staring in a daze at the noodles floating with oil drops in the large sea bowl on the table. She was momentarily stunned, then hurriedly said, "My name is Li Tiantian. Sister, you can just call me Tiantian from now on." Lin Qingxue nodded her head and didn't say much else. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a tractor came rumbling into the village, stopping at your doorstep according to the directions you provided. Inside the courtyard, Lin Qingxue, who was shucking corn, heard the commotion outside and hurriedly put down the chore at hand. She stood up and walked to the doorway, happening to see you, nimble jumping down from the tractor, her heart instantly filled with doubts. Why did he come back riding the sputtering tractor before she could even ask for the details? The tractor driver shouted at the top of his lungs, "Young man, can your house even hold this many things?" As he spoke, he walked around from the front of the vehicle to the back, budging the television bit by bit toward the edge. Deeply afraid of damaging it, you dashed forward in one stride and hoisted the television right down from the vehicle. Grinning at the tractor driver, you said, "There will be plenty of space in the future." Standing to the side, Lin Qingshui was completely dumbfounded by the scene before her eyes. She asked blankly, "Did you buy all of these?" Her voice was filled with utter disbelief. "So many things plus a television. How much money and how many vouchers must this have cost?" Seeing your fair and beautiful wife's eyes staring blankly, you walked forward and gently touched her cheek. You knew in your heart that she was anxious about the money, but you didn't care about this small amount of cash at all. You just wanted your wife to enjoy a good life with you from now on, never letting her suffer even a little bit of hardship again. You leaned in close to Lin Qingshui's ear and whispered, "I'll explain it to you in detail later. Stand aside for now, so you don't get bumped. I'll unload the things first." Hearing your words, Lin Qingshui moved to the side like a puppet, watching item after item being unloaded from the vehicle, piling up like a small mountain. She felt an immense pang of regret in her heart. Had she known it would turn out like this, she would have held the baby and gone into the city with you. How much money did this cost? How could he be so reckless with their livelihood? Where did the money and vouchers come from? Ordinary families could never afford a television. Just the electricity bill alone would cost a fortune. What a complete spendthrift at this moment. Li Tiantian, who was standing in the corner, cradling the tiny infant in her arms, was staring fixatedly at that tall, broad-shouldered, and long-legged young man. So this was the village thug. She originally thought you would be ugly, coarse, and completely unbearable, never expecting you to actually be a man with deep, well-defined features, and quite a handsome, dashing looker. In her entire life growing up, she had rarely seen such a handsome man, making her heart thump wildly and flutter non-stop. Li Tiantian finally understood now why a beautiful woman like Lin Qingshui had married so early. It turned out this man looked even better than the movie star Wang Xinggang. Once the items were all unloaded, you pulled 2 yuan from your pocket and handed it to the tractor master. Taking the money, the master waved his hand, started up his tractor, and drove away. You then began moving the items into the courtyard. When your wife tried to help you, wouldn't even let her, telling her to just sit down and rest, completely failing to notice that there was an extra unfamiliar woman in the house. Zhao Zhenxing rushed over after hearing rumors. Seeing so many things piled up at his brother's doorstep, he was completely flabbergasted. Where did this lazy fellow get so much money to buy all of this? His dirt-poor home had nothing valuable to sell. Could he have sold the child? At this thought, Zhao Zhenxing couldn't help but quicken his pace. Rushing to the front door, he spotted his little niece in the female-educated youth's arms, and only then did his heart finally settle at ease. Without saying a word, Zhao Zhenxing silently helped move the items into the courtyard. Staring at that heavy iron box, images and sounds would come out once it was plugged in, looking like a bunch of ants fighting inside. Very lively, just like watching a movie. He curiously circled around it a few times, too embarrassed to reach out and touch it. He heard this precious thing cost several hundred yuan. This was the television city folks often talked about. He really didn't expect his own brother to actually bring one back, making it the only one in the entire village. After the things were properly put away, Zhao Zhenxing dragged you to the courtyard gate and asked where you got so much money. Unfazed and unhurried, you patted your chest and said that all of this was money earned from hunting and selling the prey on the black market. You didn't tell your eldest brother about the dendrobium, not because you didn't trust him, but because dendrobium only grows on steep cliffs and precipices. Even if you told him, he wouldn't be able to help. If word got out by accident, it would even cut off your own source of wealth. Once the spring warmed up next year, you would lead your eldest brother and second brother up the mountain to find a few good harvesting spots and teach them the tricks. After that, it would all depend on their own luck. Zhao Zhenxing wanted to advise you to just focus on farming properly. But looking at his own brother, whose eyes were flashing with light, revealing a sense of shrewdness and depth that he had never seen before, it was as if you had to become a completely different person, making him as the eldest brother feel like he barely recognized you. Thinking that it was rare for your eldest brother to come over, you revealed your plan to build a house to him, wanting to ask for his help, stating that you would pay him a daily wage of 1 yuan. Zhao Zhenxing took a puff of his cigarette and said, "If you stop fooling around, I'll work for you for free, so why would I need a wage?" But building a house is no joke. It costs a fortune. Eldest brother, I have the money, and I'll pay the wages as promised. Even real brothers should keep clear financial accounts. Please help me find a highly skilled master craftsman and use better quality materials as well. Let's strive to move into the new house before winter sets in. Zhao Zhenxing nodded, thinking that Old Fourth just wanted to do some repairs on those 3 thatched huts. How could he have guessed that you would be so bold as to want to build a 2-story house? The reason you handed all these matters over to your eldest brother in one go was simply because you were incredibly busy yourself. You reasoned that you had to harvest all the dendrobium before winter arrived. If you came across wild medicinal herbs like foti root again, you could also sell them for cash. If you lucked out and ran into a sika deer, getting some deer antler or deer whip, that would be scoring a massive bonus. Seeing that the day was still early, the two of you put your heads together and went to find Wang Xuanju. In the era of the planned economy, you needed a permit to buy bricks to build a house. In this day and age, Wang Xuanzhu, as the village chief, held invincible power. You gave him a pack of Daqiaomen cigarettes and slipped him 1 yuan, successfully getting the permit to buy bricks. After getting the permit, you headed straight to the commune's brickyard and placed the order for the bricks to build the house. Zhao Zhenxing was puzzled. Old Fourth, how thick are you planning to make the walls that you need to order so many bricks? You told him you were going to build 2 stories. Watching you take out 2 10 yuan bills without even batting an eyelid and handing them to the brickyard boss, Zhao Zhenxing winced in sympathetic pain for the money. When he heard that the remaining balance would be paid once the bricks were delivered home, Zhao Zhenxing's eyes widened in shock, feeling that this whole thing was simply unbelievable. That was 10 yuan currency, not toilet paper. Yet you just carried it so casually in your pocket, not even afraid of losing it. Zhao Zhenxing felt that his brother, who used to be such a degenerate gambler, now carried such an imposing air in front of outsiders, more like a leader than the brickyard manager himself. Just standing there, he exuded an unprovoked authority. If he were wearing an unpatched blue cloth jacket, people would even believe he was the son of some high-ranking official. If it weren't for the mole on his neck still being there, and the scar from when he used to fight, Zhao Zhenxing would have suspected whether Old Fourth had been secretly swapped by someone. On the way home, Zhao Zhenxing felt dazed, as if he were floating on air. It was definitely Old Fourth, but he kept feeling like something was strange. As they were getting close to home, you took 5 10 yuan bills out of your jacket pocket and handed them over eldest brother. Besides the wood, please trouble yourself to help me organize the other materials. Zhao Zhenxing reached out to take it, but then felt his hands were a bit dirty. So he wiped them on the hem of his clothes before taking the money. He carefully tucked the money into his inner pocket, deathly afraid of accidentally losing it. Zhao Zhenxing spoke to you with absolute sincerity with so much money. Since you trust your eldest brother, I will absolutely get everything handled beautifully for you. You nodded your head, eldest brother. How could I not trust you? If it weren't for the care given by his eldest brother and sister-in-law with the grievances his wife suffered in his previous life, it was highly likely that their daughter wouldn't even have been born. Completely lost to his own reckless behavior. In the main room of the Zhao family home, Lin Qingxue was organizing the items brought back. She pulled a square cloth out from the cabinet and carefully draped it over the television set, deeply afraid that a single speck of dust would gather and dirty the TV. If you asked her opinion, why even buy this thing? The village had blackouts from time to time, and an antenna had to be set up. When there was no signal, the entire screen would be full of static snow. But seeing how enthusiastically excited you were, she didn't have the heart to complain about you wasting money. She discovered that you bought things for her and their daughter again. There were a lady's sweater pants and leather shoes, along with several sets of little clothes for the baby. Why was this man recklessly spending money again? What kind of family buys new clothes to wear every single day? The jacket you bought her at the town last time. She hadn't even worn it yet, reluctant to put it on. Yet you unexpectedly bought her so many clothes again. However, seeing that you always kept the mother and daughter in mind, Lin Qingxue was still extremely happy. She picked up the light, soft, and thick cotton quilts, preparing to put them into the chests, unable to stop her tears from falling. These were even better than the new cotton quilts she brought as a dowry when she married into the family. As she finished organizing all the items, Lin Qingxue realized that this man actually hadn't bought a single thing for himself. But his own shirt was covered in patch after patch, and his shoes even had a hole worn straight through them. Li Tiantian was helping by holding the baby girl, staring longingly at those new clothes, scratching her head anxiously like a cat that had spotted a fish. That V-neck sweater was the most popular and trendy style in the city. She had wanted to buy one herself when she browsed the mall, but her parents absolutely refused to agree to spend nearly half a month's salary just to buy a sweater. Watching the clothes she wanted to buy but couldn't afford appear right here in more than just one piece, Li Tiantian was consumed by an absolute wave of envy, jealousy, and spite. Lin Qingxue's husband was remarkably handsome and talented, and was especially willing to spend money on his wife. What's more, he really knew how to cherish her. When moving the things just now, he wouldn't let her lift a finger, deeply afraid that she would tire herself out, doting on her as if she were the apple of his eye. How could the village pass around rumors that such a good man was a gambling lazy bum? It was simply complete nonsense. You walked in from the outside with large, casual strides. The moment you entered the door, you saw an unfamiliar young woman standing there holding the child, looking at your wife with a beaming smile. Is this your friend? Upon noticing your gaze, Li Tiantian lowered her eyes slightly, not daring to look you in the eye. Although she considered herself a city person and had always looked down on these country bumpkins, ever since the man of this house came back on the tractor, covered in the dust of the road, even though she had been standing right beside them the whole time, his eyes and heart only had room for the little sister-in-law. Despite a living person being right here, he surprisingly didn't glance at her even once from beginning to end. Lin Qingxue was busy with the chores on hand. Hearing your question, she only then realized there was an extra person in the house. That female educated youth had been completely quiet. and she herself had been solely focused on organizing those things you bought back. Flinging the guest completely to the back of her mind, Lin Qingshui quickly, with an apologetic look, took the child from Li Tiantian's arms and said to you, "This is an educated youth sent to the countryside brought over by the team leader. He said she wants to temporarily lodge at our house. What do you think? Should we clear out the west room for her to live in?" There was a tone of consultation in her words. Even though you said she called the shots in this house, she still didn't dare to make the decision all by herself, deeply afraid of causing a misunderstanding. The moment you heard an outsider wanted to live in the house, your brow knit together slightly and unconsciously. You definitely didn't want a stranger coming in to disrupt the quiet life of you and your wife. But when you saw your wife's expectant gaze, the words of refusal just couldn't escape your lips no matter what, deeply afraid that she would think you were going against her wishes. You didn't say a word. First, you pulled your wife into the inner room, took off your outer jacket, and then took out the remaining money from selling the dendrobium from your hidden pocket, handing it over to her. Next, you took the baby from Lin Qingshui's arms, played with her, and told your wife about your plan to build a brand new house. Lin Qingshui took the money from your hand. Looking at those crisp, brand new 10 yuan bills in her hand, it was somewhat hard for her to believe. After buying so many things, there was actually this much money left over. The 2 stalks of dendrobium, 1 piece of foti root, and whatever deer antler and deer whip, really worth this much money. When you mentioned your idea of wanting to build a house, Lin Qingshui quickly put the money away properly. Under your eager gaze, she cautiously hid the money away completely out of sight, and then fell into a brief silence. If they didn't build a house, just relying on the money earned these past couple of days would be enough for their family of 3 to live a comfortable, well-off life for several years. But if they really built a house, this money would probably be far from enough, and they would even end up with a mountain of external debt. As for her maternal family, her younger brother had also helped their family a lot over the past 2 years. Now they also had a child of their own to raise. So how could she have the nerve to open her mouth to borrow money again? While Lin Qingshui was pondering over this, you seemed to see right through her thoughts, suddenly planting a kiss on her fair, tender cheek. "Wife, don't worry about the money. You have me, just rest well at home, and don't tire yourself out." That sudden soft warm sensation on her cheek made Lin Qingshui's face flush completely red instantly. She gave you a glare with her beautiful eyes, reminding you in a low voice, "What are you doing? There's still someone outside. Aren't you ashamed?" You, however, had a face as thick as a brass wall and an iron rampart. You just looked at Lin Qingshui with a beaming smile. In your previous life, you were worth a fortune, and had been to all kinds of grand occasions. As you spoke, you leaned down once again, lowering your head onto Lin Qingshui's rosy full lips to take a gentle, playful bite. Looking at his wife's fair pink-tinted cheeks, your heart melted completely along with it. She was already a mother, so how could she still be this shy and innocent? You stopped teasing her and turned back to the main topic, saying, "Eldest brother will order the materials and come back tomorrow. In case he doesn't have enough money and asks you for it, make sure you don't forget to give it to him." Lin Qingshui nodded silently, but felt a bit uncomfortable in her heart. She recalled what the next-door neighbors said about eldest brother and second sister-in-law, and felt uneasy whenever eldest brother came to mind. With your sharp eyes, you noticed your wife's expression wasn't right, leaning in close against her cheek to ask, "What's wrong, wife? If anything is bothering you, don't keep it bottled up inside." Lin Qingshui thought about it but still shook her head, choosing not to say anything. Seeing that your wife didn't want to talk, you didn't press her any further. Over there, Li Tiantian stood in the main room, vaguely overhearing Lin Qingshui's reminder about someone still being outside, making her face flush as red as a monkey's butt. She lightened her steps and walked to the center of the courtyard, breathing in the fresh air, and by some bizarre twist of fate, she stopped her steps to go find the team leader to change her lodging. The male head of this household didn't seem to be as unbearable as the villagers outside rumored. Just now, when the little sister-in-law was organizing the items, she stood right there holding the baby and saw everything crystal clear. Most of those items were for household use, as well as clothes for the baby and the little sister-in-law, yet she saw absolutely nothing for the man's own use. While Li Tiantian stood in the yard, staring blankly, the little daughter you were rocking in your arms had already fallen fast asleep. Her perfectly sculpted little face carried a sweet expression. You turned around gently, tenderly placing the sleeping little princess onto the bed, and carefully pulled up the quilt. Afterwards, Lin Qingshui walked out from inside the house and said to Li Tiantian, "You'll have to bear with it tonight, and just make do for now. There are a bit too many things piled up in the west room, so eldest brother might not be able to clear it all out at once." Li Tiantian heard Lin Qingshui's words, and when she turned her head and saw her flushed cheeks, she couldn't help but associate it with the conversation between the couple in the room that she had vaguely overheard just now. Her own face felt a bit hot, so she quickly avoided her gaze. "It's no trouble at all. Sorry to bother you and eldest brother," Li Tiantian hurriedly said. Lin Qingshui smiled and shook her head at Li Tiantian, saying, "As long as you don't look down on our family for being poor." As she spoke, she bent her waist, intending to move her daughter's small wooden bed to her own eastern room. Seeing this, you quickly rushed forward to help wife. Let me move it. Be careful not to strain your waist. Lin Qingxue smiled, turned around and went to the west room, also wanting to help clean up. Working bare-chested, you were repeatedly requested by your wife, so you had no choice but to throw on a white tank top. Those muscular, well-defined arms were exposed, exuding a sense of pure strength. The tank top covered the scratch marks of varying depths on his broad back. Completely unaware of why your wife made you wear a tank top, you just hoisted up a few bamboo rakes like this, planning to move them to the courtyard. You had barely busied yourself for a moment when you spotted your wife rolling up her sleeves and coming in. You hurriedly spoke up to stop her. Wife, no need for you to lend a hand here. The dust is too heavy. Quick, go out and wait in the yard. Seeing that Lin Qingxue wouldn't listen to your advice, you grew anxious in your heart, put down the fencing material in your hands and pushed her out. You felt such an ache of tenderness in your heart. The dust was so heavy here. How could you let her come in to help if it weren't for the thought that during the upcoming house construction, a bunch of grown men would be filtering in and out of the house? You would never have allowed this female-educated youth to lodge at home. But then again, keeping Li Tiantian around also had its benefits. When you went up the mountain to hunt and harvest dendrobium, she could keep your wife company to chat and relieve her boredom. Li Tiantian saw you push Lin Qingxue out and couldn't help but cover her mouth, teasing with a smile. Sister Big Brother really dotes on you. Hearing Li Tiantian's words, a flush of crimson appeared on Lin Qingxue's face. She gave a somewhat bashful smile, but didn't say a word. This man had truly changed completely. As long as he was home, he wouldn't let her touch any chores, and he would even boil the hot water for her nightly sponge bath and bring it into the room for her. These past few days, she did indeed feel a sense of being carefully cherished and protected. It was just that things were so good that life felt a little surreal, leaving her even a bit on edge. Lin Qingxue was deathly afraid that once your novelty wore off, you would change right back to how you used to be. It caused her to spend every single day anxiously worrying about what might be gained or lost. Her mental state was currently under a high level of tension every day, greedily hoping that these good days could last just a little bit longer. Because of this, she was exceptionally careful in her speech and actions, deeply afraid of making you unhappy. During mealtime, watching you hand the white flour buns over to her while taking massive bites of the coarse-grained buns yourself. Clearly, the one who used to complain that coarse-grained buns tasted bad was you, and the one who asked her to make some white flour buns was also you. Yet, once they were made, you wouldn't take a single bite, leaving them all for her. In reality, she was fine eating anything. As long as you could settle down to live a proper life and stop going out to mess around, she would be completely satisfied. Lin Qingxue still hadn't figured out to this day why you had suddenly become so good. In the past, it wasn't that you hadn't done terrible things after getting drunk, holding her to apologize once you sobered up, and kneeling on the ground to swear a vicious oath. Every time after you threw a drunken tantrum, you would indeed restrain yourself a bit. But that would only last for 2 or 3 days tops, before you reverted to your old ways and continued going out to fool around. She had never seen you act like you did these past few days, doing the cooking, boiling the water, and even knowing how to soothe the baby, even buying a complete set of clothes and shoes for the child. Lin Qingxue saw everything clearly in her mind, constantly reminding herself that she must maintain her sobriety and not dive headfirst into this sweet whirlpool. In case the dream woke up later and reality turned out different from now, what on earth would she do? However, you knew nothing about these twists and turns in your wife's mind. Seeing that the sky was growing dark, you finally finished clearing out the west room. You wiped the sweat from your forehead, turn around, and walk out. That room was a mud brick house with tiles, which had always been piled with clutter and left unoccupied. The newspaper on the wall was as rotten as a spiderweb, shedding debris at the slightest touch. Although it had been cleaned, there was still a lot of dust inside. You nimbly put together a small bed using wooden planks, finally completing the task assigned by your wife. Seeing you walk out covered in sweat, Lin Qingxue quickly picked up a towel and handed it over. Quick, wipe it off. Dinner will be ready right away. You didn't reach out to take it. Instead, your tall and upright body bent down slightly, bringing your magnified, ruggedly handsome face right in front of your wife. Breathing out warm air, you said, "Wife, can you wipe it for me?" Hearing your words, Lin Qingxue subconsciously glanced at Li Tiantian, who was carrying her things into the room. Once she went inside, Lin Qingxue stood on her tiptoes, raising her hand to wipe the sweat from your forehead, not forgetting to remind you there's an outsider at home now. When you get up to use the restroom in the morning, don't go bare-chested anymore, and wear a pair of large boxer shorts, so the young girl doesn't see you and feel embarrassed. Your dark, bright, and piercing eyes stared at your wife, who was close at hand. Seeing her wiping so carefully, and nagging about these trivial matters, your heart felt warm and cozy. Although you felt that not being able to go bare-chested in your own home was a bit of a hassle. Looking at your wife's deadpan serious expression, you curled your lips into a smile, and gave Lin Qingxue's rosy vermilion lips a quick gentle kiss, like a dragonfly skimming the water. You readily agreed, "I'll listen to whatever you say." Lin Qingxue's face and ears flushed completely red from this sudden, intimate little gesture of yours. It would be one thing if it were just the two of them at home. But now, there was an unmarried young lady in the house. He really had no sense of shame. With her face flushed red, Lin Qingshui said to you, "Stop dawdling. Go wash your hands and eat." Then she turned around and went straight to the kitchen. Looking at the silhouette of your wife fleeing in embarrassment, you grinned and burst out laughing. A content smile overflowed across your handsome face. You walked over to the side of the well, pulled up a bucket of cold water, and washed your face with splashes of water. Having broken out in a sweat, your body felt sticky and extremely uncomfortable. You looked around. You were the only person in the courtyard. Taking off the little tank top, you poured the cold water from the bucket directly over your head. It felt incredibly refreshing. Never expecting that Li Tiantian would happen to walk out of the room and catch sight of this exact scene. Staring at the bare-chested man with his back turned toward her, revealing a well-built physique, well-proportioned muscles, and clear-cut lines, which also bore several scratch marks. Li Tiantian's cheeks burned as she watched, and she turned around back into the room out of sheer embarrassment. These mud brick houses had zero sound insulation, were pitch black, and were covered in dust everywhere. Li Tiantian couldn't bear to stay here for even a single day. Hearing that splashing sound of water, Lin Qingshui walked out carrying the dishes. At a single glance, she saw you bare-chested and soaking wet all over, looking like you had just been dragged out of the river. Instantly, a surge of anger flared up in her heart. She put the dishes down on the stone table in the courtyard, stepped forward, grabbed your arm, and pulled you inside. While pulling, she complained, "In such cold weather, what on earth will we do if you fall sick?" You let your wife drag you into the house. Listening to her complaining words, your heart felt warm and cozy, knowing that she was truly and genuinely worried about you. Once inside the inner room, Lin Qingshui picked up a small blanket used for the baby, stood on her tiptoes, and carefully wiped the water off your head for you. She was so focused that she didn't even bat an eyelid. Not forgetting to scold you, "Lower your head, hurry up," completely failing to notice that you were staring at her with a goofy broad grin on your face. Hearing your wife's words, you quickly spread your long legs and obediently lowered your head to let your wife wipe it. "Wife, how about you change into the new clothes tomorrow? I want to see you in them." As soon as these words came out, the movement of Lin Qingshui's hands paused slightly and she didn't say a word. Seeing that your hair was mostly dry, she moved behind your back, wiping away the water stains on your back inch by inch. Staring at the marks on your back, her face burned with a blush. She clearly wasn't like this before. At the thought of this, Lin Qingshui's heartbeat became completely chaotic. She threw the small blanket into your arms and said, "Wipe the front yourself." After wiping clean, change your pants and come out for dinner. Lin Qingshui lifted the cloth curtain and walked out, running right into Li Tiantian, who was coming out of the west room. The two looked at each other and smiled, tacitly choosing not to say anything. A tiny place the size of a palm with 3 mud brick rooms. What was said in the east room could be heard clearly in the west room. Li Tiantian could neither sit nor stand comfortably, feeling awkward all over. If things continued like this at night, she would feel like she was being roasted on a fire. You changed into another pair of pants, threw a gray shirt over your upper body, and walked out with large strides. You sat down on the stone stool beside your wife and glanced over at the stone table. The scrambled eggs made this morning were barely touched, and not a single one of the 8 pieces of meat was missing. You frowned and looked at your wife. "Did you not eat this morning?" Lin Qingshui had just picked up her chopsticks, and looking up to see your dark face and frowning brow, her heart suddenly convulsed. With a tremble of her hand, a chopstick fell to the ground with a clatter. She was instantly crushed inside. Had he revealed his true colors this quickly? She actually thought he could hold out a bit longer this time. The dream woke up all too fast. She put down the other chopstick, avoided your gaze, and took a deep breath. "I ate half a bun and 2 pieces of oat." Her voice was calm, but her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her worn-out jacket, her whole body trembling. The sound of the chopstick hitting the ground brought you back to your senses instantly. Noticing that something was wrong, you took a closer look and saw that Lin Qingshui's eyes were completely red, wet and glistening like a letter drenched by the rain. Your heart clenched and you instantly panicked. You were just aching with tenderness because she was reluctant to eat. Never expecting your tone to be too blunt and scare her, you reached out wanting to hold her, but she dodged away. You panicked even more. A big guy over 1.8 meters tall squatted in front of his wife, his face full of panic. "Wife, I was just a little anxious just now. I really didn't mean to snap at you." As your tone softened, Lin Qingshui could no longer bottle up her grievances, and her tears came pattering down. She had really been terrified just now, thinking you had reverted into that bad-tempered demon who would raise his hand to beat people. You were worried to death out of tenderness. Scooping her up by the waist, you walked swiftly into the east room. Li Tiantian had just sat down on the stone stool, looking completely bewildered. What on earth just happened? Now she was the only one left in the courtyard. Inside the room, you looked heart-wrenchingly at the person in your arms, whose eyes were red from crying, and her delicate nose was flushed with red. Your heart felt as if a knife were twisting inside. Lowering your head onto her eyelids, you said in a soft, gentle voice, "Wife, I'm sorry. I was really wrong. I was just afraid you'd be reluctant to eat and snapped at you out of sheer anxiety. I'm busy outside all day long and have no way to keep an eye on your meals at all times. Being anxious for a moment, my tone became too harsh. Lin Qingshua's heart gradually felt a bit more comforted, and she also felt she had been a bit excessive just now. Being spoiled and protected by him recently, she had become fragile. Now that everything was talked through, she felt even more embarrassed. Her fair fingers tightly gripped the shirt on his chest, her eyelids lowered slightly, biting her lower lip without saying a single word. At this moment, you suddenly said out of nowhere, "Wife, what's going on here?" Following the direction of his finger, Lin Qingxue only then noticed that she was probably leaking breast milk before she could even reply. Who would have thought that the crucian carp tofu soup and venison stewed recently turns out to be so effective? You then asked if their daughter had enough to eat lately. Lin Qingshue's fair skin instantly flushed red, looking just like a perfectly ripe persimmon. She tried to push her away out of your embrace, turning her back to you, "Get out first." Her voice trembled slightly. She had been drinking crucian carp soup every day. She didn't know if it actually worked, but the baby had been fully breastfed for the past 2 days, without needing any formula. But even so, she still had too much milk. It would swell and hurt during the day. Last night, this thick-skinned man had even sucked some out, which made her feel a bit better during the day. Yet she unexpectedly leaked milk again. With her face flushed, she lowered her head to unbutton her shirt, completely failing to notice that you were staring fixatedly at her actions. You watched Lin Qingshui with intense longing eyes. She had just taken off her outer jacket when she realized this shameless man was actually staring right at her. She instantly grew flushed with irritation. "What are you doing? Get out quickly. I need to change my clothes." You had absolutely no intention of leaving. Instead, you leaned your head a few inches closer. "Wife, the baby is asleep. It must be uncomfortable for you to feel bloated like this. Let me handle it." After saying that, you gave Lin Qingshui zero time to react. Li Tiantian sat outside on the stone stool, resting her chin on one hand. The sky had already turned pitch black, and both the stars and moon had come out. Yet that couple still hadn't emerged. She didn't dare to rashly go inside to check, so she could only keep waiting. After a long time passed, the two finally walked out of the room. Li Tiantian noticed that the corners of the little sister-in-law's eyes were moist. Her cheeks were flushed with deep crimson, and her lips were bright red, looking incredibly vibrant. She must have been coaxed and comforted, well, right? Seeing Li Tiantian staring at her, Lin Qingshui recalled what just happened, and her face burned intensely. She sat down, picked up a pair of chopsticks, and handed them to Li Tiantian. "Let's eat." Then she handed another pair of chopsticks to the man beside her. After you took your seat, you didn't spare a single sideways glance at Li Tiantian throughout the entire time. You put a white flour bun into your wife's hand, while grabbing a coarse grain bun yourself and taking huge bites, pondering in your mind about finding time to go to the reservoir, to catch a few crucian carps to nourish your wife. How could Lin Qingshui know what her man was thinking? Worried that Li Tiantian would feel uncomfortable, she handed a white flour bun over. "Eat up. Don't be polite, just treat this as your own home." Li Tiantian took a small bite, muttering in her heart whether this family was actually poor or rich. If they were poor, they were eating white flour buns, and the dishes consisted of scrambled eggs and meat, a standard that wouldn't pale in comparison even in the city. This morning, the team leader's family ate black sorghum buns with pickled daikon. But if they were rich, they lived in 3 mud brick rooms, and except for the television bought today, there wasn't even a single decent piece of furniture. The very bed she was sleeping on was just randomly put together with a few wooden planks. When making her bed, she was actually afraid it would collapse if she rolled over at night. Oh right, she heard him talking to the tractor master during the day about building a house. Then wouldn't this old house be demolished? When the time came, there wouldn't even be a place to live. So why did he still agree to let her stay? It was obvious that this big brother had no one else in his eyes besides the little sister-in-law. He clearly didn't like her living here. Just as she was letting her mind wander, the baby's crying sound came from the room. In the very next second, you got up, told Lin Qingshui to keep eating, and strode into the room yourself. Turning on the light, you picked up your daughter who had woken up in her small bed. Lin Qingshui put down her chopsticks and reached out to take her, but you dodged away. "You eat first." "I'm not hungry yet. I'll eat in a bit." Lin Qingshui naturally knew that he only said he wasn't hungry because he wanted her to eat first. Coming back from outside and then busying himself with clearing the clutter, how could he possibly not be hungry? But she didn't expose him, picking up her chopsticks to continue eating. Li Tiantian kept her eyes lowered, nibbling on her bun, secretly observing the interaction style of this couple with her peripheral vision, unconsciously comparing them to her own family. When her 2 older brothers came back from work, they barely ever touched the children. Whenever the children cried and fussed, her sisters-in-law would always soothe them first. The men would just sit there, waiting to eat, acting like kings, holding the baby with one hand while struggling to eat with the other. But this big brother in front of her was walking back and forth in the yard holding the child, soothing her, which she found completely mind-blowing. Lin Qingshu finished her meal quickly, took the child from the man's arms, and went back into the room. The moment she left, Li Tiantian secretly raised her eyes to look at the young man sitting opposite her. She saw him taking massive bites of his bun and eggs with absolutely no expression on his handsome face, exuding a cold and distant air. This was a completely different face compared to when the little sister-in-law was around. Li Tiantian felt a bit creeped out watching this, sitting there on pins and needles. Stuttering a bit, she said, "Big brother, I'm full." She gathered the dishes and carried them into the kitchen, washed them in a frantic hurry, and went straight back to the West Room, not daring to come out again. The sky had turned completely pitch black. You sat alone in the courtyard, eating the remaining 4 coarse grain buns, and finishing the noodle soup before finally feeling full. Afterwards, you boiled another pot of hot water, and carried the water basin back into the room. "Wife, remember to wipe your body down. I'm going to use the restroom." You placed the water basin on the stand and walked out. Lin Qingshui closed the door, took off her clothes, and washed herself with the hot water. Right after she finished washing and put on her clothes, she vaguely heard some noise behind the house. She thought she had misheard, but in the next second, a man's voice came from outside. "Good sister, are you taking a bath?" Every single hair on Lin Qingshui's body stood on end, and she let out a loud scream. Outside the house, you had just pulled up your waistband when you heard the scream and quickly rushed out, catching the person who threw herself into your arms head on. Holding her tightly, you lowered your eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" Lin Qingshui wrapped her arms tightly around your waist, her body shivering. Someone was just behind the house. You raised your dark eyes and looked out beyond the courtyard wall. And sure enough, you saw a person's head hurriedly running away in the distance. In an instant, your deep eyes were colored with a terrifying, furious rage. You retracted your gaze, looked at the person in your arms who was only wearing undergarments, and scooped her up by the waist, placing her onto the bed. Coming out of the bedroom, you gave instructions to Li Tiantian, who was standing at the door of the West Room. "Help me keep an eye on her. I'm going out for a bit." Without saying anything more, you strode out of the courtyard with your long legs, your tall and upright silhouette disappearing into the dark night. Over at Erlaizi's house at the east end of the village, the next-door neighbors listened to Erlaizi's miserable wails and the muffled sounds of fists slamming into a body, their hearts trembling with fear as they listened. They all knew you were a reckless, lawless guy, who was a ruthless person to the bone. They didn't know how Erlaizi had provoked you, but listening to the commotion, you were dealing heavy blows, and they were truly afraid the man would be beaten to death alive. "Fourth brother, I was wrong. I went to peep at the educated youth Li Tiantian, but I really didn't see anything at all." Hearing Erlaizi beg for mercy, you directly dislocated his jaw. "What kind of absolute nonsense are you spouting? Didn't you say you craved meat and went to eat some?" "Fourth brother, I was wrong." Erlaizi didn't even have the strength left to crawl up and kneel, truly terrified of being beaten to death by you. For a split second there, you really wanted to cripple him, but thinking of Lin Qingshui and your daughter, your blows became a little less severe. Lin Qingshui lay on the bed. After an unknown amount of time, she heard the splashing sound of water in the yard, and only then knew that you were back and were taking a cold shower. After about 10 minutes, she heard the sound of the door opening and closing. In the darkness, thinking she was asleep, you lightened your steps as you entered the room. Just as you were about to grope your way into bed in the dark, a voice came from the bed. "You're back." Lin Qingshui reached out and turned on the light, brightening the room. You stopped your movements and saw the person on the bed propping her head up with one hand, her jet black hair cascading over her snow-white shoulders and neck. Your gaze darkened a bit. You climbed onto the bed, reached out, and turned off the light. In the darkness, you wrapped your arm around her completely lean waist, patting her back. "Everything is fine now. Wife, go to sleep." Before you came back, she didn't dare to sleep, fearing you wouldn't know when to stop and might beat the man to death, and also fearing the gossip from the villagers. She was terrified, shrinking into your embrace like a little kitten, her cheek pressed against your solid burning chest. Listening to that powerful heartbeat, she gradually calmed down. In the dead of night, she didn't dare to cry out loud, afraid of waking up their daughter. Looking at his wife like this, you only felt that you had let him off too easily. You originally thought that with your notorious reputation, the village punks wouldn't dare do anything, never expecting someone would actually dare to harbor wicked ideas. But after today, those who had ideas would definitely think twice. Looking at the man, with exhaustion written all over his face, and thinking about how he had been leaving early and returning late recently, digging up dendrobium to sell, giving all the money to her, protecting her and coaxing her, she realized he had truly changed. In the darkness, Lin Qingshui grew tired from crying, and fell asleep in a daze. Hearing the even breathing of the person beside you, you finally let out a sigh of relief. The next day, while still asleep, Lin Qingshui was awakened by the sound of voices outside the house. In the courtyard, the eldest sister-in-law of the Zhao family added a large handful of white sugar to the boiled water, pouring it out for the workers one by one. Sugar was a rare luxury these days, and normally no family could bear to buy it. Cao Fengjie drank a bowl of sugar water, leaned in close to the eldest sister-in-law, and asked in a low voice, "Eldest sister-in-law, yesterday I seemed to hear your younger brother's wife shouting at home." The eldest sister-in-law put down the kettle, and looked at the gossip-seeking Chao Fengjie. Your house is a good 2 miles away from his, yet you managed to hear it. What? Were you so bored at night that you crouched under the young couple's window to eavesdrop? Cao Fengjie smiled but didn't reply, thinking about last night when she heard that you beat Lazy from the East End within an inch of his life and even broke one of his legs. Coincidentally, that city wife of his wasn't behaving herself either. She guessed that this wife must have cheated on you behind your back. She just couldn't suppress the urge to gossip about it with someone. The eldest sister-in-law of the Zhao family couldn't be bothered to pay attention to her, carrying the kettle to pour water for the others. When she came to your side, she gave you a meaningful look, saying in a low voice, "Go check on Qingshui." Usually she would have been awake by this time, so make sure she hasn't fallen sick from the scare. You who were busy moving bricks stopped the work on hand. When you got up in the morning, she was indeed still asleep, and right now it was already 10 o'clock. You lifted the curtain and entered the bedroom. Lin Xingqishui woke up right as you opened the door and walked in. You subconsciously pulled her into your embrace, turning your face to say to the person in your arms, "Now that you're awake, change into your clothes first. I'll bring the food inside for you to eat in a bit." Your voice carried a hint of hoarseness. The window curtains were still drawn, and it was incredibly noisy outside. Lin Qingxui couldn't help but ask, "What are they doing in the yard? It's so noisy." You smiled and replied, "They're renovating the courtyard wall. It's a complete mess out there. Wife, don't come out just yet. There's still work to do outside." "Then why aren't you letting go of me yet?" You kept it neither too tight nor too loose, holding her snugly. You told her, "Give me a kiss and I'll let go. Stop fooling around. Let go quickly. The yard is full of people." "How am I fooling around? You're my wife. Yet you aren't even willing to give me a little kiss. Do you not love me anymore?" Your tone carried a bit of aggrieved fierceness. Lin Qingxui originally wanted to explain, but in the end, she didn't say anything, leaning forward to give your cheek a gentle peck. "There, let go of me quickly." Having been kissed by her, a bright light flashed through your attractive eyes, happily cupping her small face. "It's boring for me to just stay in the room. I want to go out and help." Without even thinking, you rejected her flat out. "If you're bored, I'll have eldest sister-in-law come in to chat with you in a bit." Lin Qingxui knew there was no hope of going out to help. Seeing you take a step to open the door and walk out, she went back to the bedroom out of boredom to play with her daughter. Because there were many people helping, the courtyard wall was already fully built. Around 4 p.m. that afternoon, the 2-meter-high wall was covered with broken glass shards on top. Without the help of a ladder, your average person would find it difficult to even climb a 2-meter wall, let alone with broken glass shards paved all over it. Building the courtyard wall before building the actual house was definitely a first in the village. Behind your house, Cao Fengjie giggled and said, "Last night when I came out to use the restroom, I saw Lazy sneaking out from Lin Qingshui's room. I bet the two of them have already done that stuff." Zhang Hongxia gasped, "No way. If that's true, Lin Qingshui is way too shameless." The two sisters-in-law whispered and winked at each other, their eyes filled with contempt when looking toward Lin Qingshui. This exact scene was caught by you as you had been staring at them the whole time, and every single word entered your ears without missing a beat. These two women really need a good beating. The two daughters-in-law of your maternal uncle turned out to be this kind of trash. They claimed they came to help, but they clearly came just to sneak some sugar water. You even noticed that Cao Fengjie brought a large tea mug with her, and her pants pockets were bulging. It looked like she took quite a few snacks meant for the workers. You began pondering how to deal with Cao Fengjie and Zhang Hongxia. You had to teach them a lesson thoroughly in one go, to save yourself future trouble. After having dinner, you casually strolled over to your uncle Wang Dashan's house. Wang Dashan and his two sons hadn't split the estate yet, so they all lived together. When you walked in, the Wang family was right in the middle of dinner. Seeing you arrive, everyone was quite surprised. "Zhenguo, have you eaten yet?" your uncle Wang Dashan asked your aunt. Liu Shiqin stuffed a mouthful of rice into her mouth, not thinking much of it when she saw you walking toward their side. Walking up to Cao Fengjie step by step, you suddenly grabbed a handful of her hair. This sudden move of yours completely froze everyone on the spot. Accompanied by Cao Fengjie's terrified shriek, the rest of the family finally snapped back to their senses. Wang He snapped up to his feet. "Zhenguo, what kind of madness are you driving at?" You gave a bone-chilling sneer. "What kind of madness am I driving at? Why don't you ask your own wife?" Cao Fengjie had never anticipated in her wildest dreams that the news would reach your ears this fast, or that you would storm over so quickly. As you listed out every single piece of Cao Fengjie's misdeeds, Liu Shiqin and Wang Dashan's faces turned completely pale with anger upon hearing it. The person their family married into the house wasn't a daughter-in-law at all. She was a living walking disaster. On regular days, they were terrified of their own son picking up bad habits from this Zhenguo, repeatedly warning him to keep his distance. Yet, this woman actually had the nerve to actively provoke and slander his family. Cao Fengjie cursed you internally for being a piece of trash, but on the surface, she had no idea how to explain herself. Zhang Hongxia stood up and chimed in. "Could there be some kind of misunderstanding here? Zhenguo let go of her first. Cao Fengjie is still your cousin's wife after all." Looking at this partner in crime, Yu barked, Zhang Hongxia, you're not a damn good thing either. Sit your ass down. Zhang Hongxia felt a wave of embarrassment, glancing at her own man Wang Yong, who remained completely silent and still, clearly wanting no part in muddying these waters. You raised your hand and delivered a fierce slap right across Cao Fengji's face. I'll teach you to run your trash mouth. Let's see if I can't rip that mouth of yours apart. Cao Fengji was completely dazed from the slap, never expecting that you would actually dare to lay a hand on her, and not a single soul from the Wang family stepped forward to stop it. You didn't stop until you slapped Cao Fengji 6 times in a row, finally letting go of her with a rough shove. Cao Fengji was seeing stars, unable to even stand steadily, stumbling and collapsing onto Wang He, only to be violently pushed away by her own husband. Wang Dashan indifferently added a line, you were just asking for a beating. Serves you right. Liu Shuqin glared at Cao Fengjie, feeling utterly disgusted. Cao Fengjie, are you completely brainless or what? Or can you just not bear to see Zhengguo and his wife live a happy life? How dare you spout such malicious nonsense? She was clearly stirring up trouble and driving a wedge between people. Even after getting beaten, absolutely nobody felt any pity for her. I didn't say those things. Other than taking it to her grave and denying everything, Cao Fengji had absolutely no other way out. You claim you didn't say those words. Do you dare to swear an oath? If you are lying, your entire family will die. Your parents will suffer a horrible death, and your children will also suffer a horrible death. Cao Fengjie was way too naive. How could she possibly be a match for a shrewd and seasoned player like you? With just a couple of sentences, you completely shut Cao Fengjie's mouth down. She grew faint-hearted, stuttering and unable to utter a single word. Everyone now understood clearly what exactly was going on. You directed your gaze toward everyone present. Today, I will leave my words right here. If I ever hear anyone spreading rumors in the village and driving a wedge between me and my wife, don't blame me for showing no mercy. When the time comes, if I beat them to death or cripple them, I won't be held responsible. As soon as the words left your mouth, you ruthlessly delivered 2 more kicks to Cao Fengjie. Wang He looked on, stepped forward, and unleashed another round of punches and kicks upon his own wife. Cao Fengjie's face became completely swollen, and she repeatedly begged for mercy while being beaten by Wang He. Still not a single person dared to step forward to break up the fight. You hadn't left yet, which meant you obviously hadn't cooled your anger, so whoever tried to break it up would just be asking for trouble. After a good while, Liu Shuqin sighed, that's about enough. If you beat her into a disability, we'll still have to spend money on medical treatment. Wang Hui raised his hand, delivering one last heavy slap right across Cao Fengjie's face. This single strike caused the corner of her mouth to bleed. He snorted and said, that's for running your trash mouth. If you act a fool again next time, I'll sew your mouth shut. Leaving these words behind, you strutted away proudly. Inside the room, except for the sound of Cao Fengjie sobbing, there was absolutely no other noise. Having thoroughly dealt with Cao Fengjie, your body and mind felt delighted, and you cheerfully headed home to look for your wife. Seeing that you had left, Wang Dashan gave Liu Shuqin a meaningful look, telling her to take the 2 daughters-in-law into the kitchen to clean up. Sitting quietly in the center of the main room and smoking, Wang Dashan tapped the table with his pipe pouch. Wang He, Wang, Young, you two keep a tight leash on your respective wives. If any rumors about Little Fourth's family spread in the village, even I won't be able to protect you. We can't afford to provoke Little Fourth. Though recently I heard he has turned over a new leaf. I can't protect you guys either. We can't afford to mess with Xiao Si. Word is he's turned over a new leaf lately. But from what I can see, he has actually become even more ruthless. The 2 brothers, Wang He and Wang Yang, lowered their heads, not daring to utter a single word. With a creaking sound, the old wooden door was pushed open. Cao Fengjie hurriedly closed her eyes, having not even thought through what she should do next. They had been married for several months, yet there was still no activity in her belly. Her father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband had just watched her get beaten, without lending a single helping hand. What kind of absolute monsters were these people? Wang He didn't speak when he came in either, sitting by the edge of the heated brick bed, lost in thought, his mind highly chaotic and far from peaceful. This younger cousin of his was far from simple. Their dad's meaning was clear, do not provoke him. But this wife of his was quite beautiful, making him reluctant to completely let go and send her back to her parents' home. Their eyes met, and neither of them spoke a single. What are you saying? Tingle what? After a short while, Cao Fengjie crawled up and said, I was wrong. Wang He was somewhat surprised, as he never expected that she would actually have a day where she admitted her mistake. Seeing that he remained silent, Cao Fengjie added, from now on, I will behave myself and live a proper life with you, guaranteeing that I won't step a single foot out of the house to gossip. Wang He stared at her for a few moments, then turned his head and walked away. Cao Fengjie turned her head to look at his back, pouting her lips slightly, feeling a bit at a loss. Should she take the initiative? Today's beating absolutely could not be suffered for nothing. Early the next morning, Lin Qingshe woke up. She divided the risen dough into 5 small portions. placed them into the pan, and pan-fried them until both sides turned golden brown. Just as she was about to pinch off a small piece to taste it, she was startled by an embrace wrapping around her from behind. You were exceptionally tall, having to bend down quite a bit to hold her entirely in your arms, your chin resting right in the crook of her neck. Lin Qingxue shivered slightly, only relaxing once she caught a whiff of your familiar scent. She turned her head around in a daze, noticing that you were staring intently at the food in her hand. She gave a soft smile and fed the flatbread into your mouth, asking, "How does it taste?" "Delicious." Your smile was genuine and natural. "Wife, in reality, you don't need to wake up this early to cook for me. You can soothe the child and sleep a bit longer. You are going hunting, and since it's cold in the mountains, eating something hot in the morning is good." A few days ago, seeing you leave the house in the morning casually, bringing just some dry rations, Lin Qingxue naturally wanted to do something for you. "I'm heading out." After having your breakfast, you put on your big boots and carried the carrying baskets on a pole, walking toward the mountain. After walking for nearly 2 hours, you successfully found that dendrobium plant, took out your tools, and busied yourself with the work. As noon approached, all the dendrobium had been harvested. Seeing that it was still early, you didn't head down the mountain immediately, but searched around the deadwood to try your luck. Sure enough, you made a huge discovery. You strode over. Those looked like mushrooms. No, wait. How could there be such bright red shriveled mushrooms? Those were 4 glossy Ganoderma of different shapes and sizes. This trip into the mountain today was totally worth it. Why hadn't you discovered before that these deep mountains were full of treasures everywhere? Putting down the carrying baskets, you broke off some leafy grass, and after lining the basket, used a sharp blade to cut the Ganoderma and place them inside. You then covered them with another thick layer of grass. Just as you were preparing to leave, the corner of your eye and peripheral vision caught an inconspicuous little hole next to an oak tree. Scattered around the entrance of the hole were fine bits of soil and footprints. Those were the traces left behind by a badger. This looks like a badger den. Badger meat is delicious and can nourish your wife's body, and badger fat is a precious medicinal ingredient. However, badgers are extremely cunning, so catching one directly is by no means a quick task. You decided to try your luck using the smoking out method. Searching through your space, you found a small handful of dried chili peppers and carefully stuffed the dried chilies and dry firewood into the entrance of the hole. The firelight flickered and thick smoke rolled up, spreading into the badger den with a pungent odor. You stepped aside and waited patiently. Once the badger felt the smoke and strange odor, it would instinctively look for an exit to escape, and you had already laid out a net at the entrance of the hole, just waiting for the badger to walk right into the trap. You were definitely taking a gamble here. Badgers are skilled at digging burrows, which are ingeniously designed and often have multiple escape exits. He remembered Animal Planet mentioning that some badger dens even have over 130 exits. Time passed second by second, the mountain forest dead silent, with only occasional bird chirps echoing around. You kept your eyes glued to the hole entrance, your palms sweating slightly. After waiting for nearly half an hour with no movement, just as you were about to give up and prepared to put out the fire with wet tree branches, there was a sudden rustle at the hole entrance. A furry badger head poked out, its eyes flashing with sheer terror amidst the smoke. Right after, its entire body squeezed out of the hole, rushing in complete panic straight into the trap net. With sharp eyes and quick hands, you swiftly pulled the net rope, trapping the badger securely inside the net. This badger visually weighed around 20 pounds or so, with a 1 in 6 chance among the exit options to catch such a specimen. You were already extremely satisfied. After taking out water from your space to ensure the fire was completely put out, only then did you turn around to head down the mountain. Meanwhile, back at the house, several villagers found out that you had bought a television set, and out of curiosity, they came knocking on your door one after another, wanting to see what this television set the city folks talked about actually looked like. Throughout the day, your house was incredibly lively, with waves of crowds coming and going. During this time, some villagers saw Zhao Zhenxing having people deliver a pile of construction materials. Upon asking and learning that you were going to build a house, they all wore expressions of absolute astonishment, and everyone had something to say. They all felt you wouldn't be able to get this house built, believing you didn't have that much money, and even secretly gossiped behind your back that you didn't know how to budget, saying spending so much money to buy a metal box was completely useless. A waste of money and a waste of electricity. Just dealing with the villagers who came to see the television exhausted Lin Qingxue completely. She felt that the house today was even livelier than on their wedding day. Just as she was about to sit down and rest, she saw you walking back carrying the baskets on a shoulder pole, and a light instantly sparked in her eyes. Holding the baby, she went to greet you. "How come you're back so early today?" While speaking, she noticed that your bamboo basket was stuffed with grass leaves. After these few times, just by looking at the grass stuffed in his bamboo basket, she could guess there was something inside. She was somewhat puzzled as to how his luck could possibly be this good. Dendrobium is the kind of thing you can only find by chance. Yet, he could bring some back every single time he returned from the mountain. Lin Qingxue was wearing a brand new red sweater, which made her skin look even more delicate, fair, and tender, momentarily dazing your eyes. After arriving in front of her, you bent down and lowered your head, trying to kiss her cheek, but she dodged away with her face completely flushed. Lin Qingxue felt that this man was always acting improperly, wanting to kiss her at every turn in broad daylight, especially when Tiantian and eldest sister-in-law were both around. Only then did you notice there were still a few villagers inside the house, and you looked at your wife in confusion. Lin Qingxue read your doubt and spoke up to explain, "The folks all want to see what the television set looks like." Fortunately, eldest sister-in-law came over to help deal with them. You nodded, wanting to take the child from her arms. But looking down and seeing that your clothes were a bit dirty, you carried the carrying baskets into the kitchen instead. Facing your wife who followed you inside, you bent over and whispered a few instructions right by her ear. Lin Qingxue glanced at the carrying baskets, nodding to show she understood, although she didn't know how many things he had brought back, or why he had to go to the city again early tomorrow morning. She didn't ask too many questions. There were still so many outsiders in the house, yet he actually dared to lean in this close. This guy who was right before her eyes had truly changed way too much recently. Noticing that your wife was secretly observing you, your smile widened from ear to ear. Smack smack, you planted a kiss on each side of your wife's palm-sized face. "Wife, make sure to eat properly today." As you spoke these words, your hands weren't staying still either, gently caressing her waist. How could it be this impossibly slender? It felt like it wasn't even 20 inches. "Wife, even when I'm not at home to supervise you, you still have to eat well. You're way too skinny." Having her waist held by you, Lin Qingxue, who was holding the baby, glared at you out of habit, just about to tell him that he was messing around regardless of the occasion. Just then, she heard eldest sister-in-law calling out from outside. "Since fourth brother is back, Qingshu, I'll be heading back now. Old Zhao should be coming back from the field soon." As she spoke, she started walking out. Lin Qingxue quickly called out to her sister-in-law. "Wait a moment." She handed the baby girl over to you, stepped out of the kitchen herself, and went into the east room. She came out holding a small bag of rock candy and stuffed it into eldest sister-in-law's hands. She was deathly afraid that you would speak up during this time and forbid her from giving it. Rock candy was a rare and precious item, which she herself couldn't bear to eat. But if it hadn't been for eldest sister-in-law's constant help and support, the life of her and her daughter before would have been even harder. Today, hearing that a lot of villagers were coming over to see the fun eldest sister-in-law, didn't even go spin her cotton, coming over instead. If eldest sister-in-law hadn't come with so many people, how could she have managed to host them all by herself? In the past, her family was poor and always took advantage of eldest sister-in-law's kindness. But now that they were well off, she wanted to repay her. Even among sisters-in-law, one couldn't always just take from others. "Sister-in-law, this was bought by Zhengguo. Take it back for the kids to eat." Eldest sister-in-law was dumbfounded, looking at the half-pound of rock candy in her hand, and quickly pushed the item back. "No way. You keep it for Niu to eat." Sugar water was used to entertain highly distinguished guests. Ordinary families could never afford to drink this. If any new bride could bring this kind of thing back on her first visit to her parental home, it would bring immense pride and honor to her family. The two of them pushed it back and forth for several rounds, and seeing that the bag was almost about to tear, only then did eldest sister-in-law bashfully accept the rock candy and turn around to head home. Lin Qingxue was afraid that you would blame her for making a decision on her own. So she dragged her leg and stammered out an explanation. "Zhengguo, it was all thanks to our sister-in-law coming over to help. There were just too many people earlier, leaving me so dizzy and overwhelmed with work that I almost forgot to eat. I gave the rock candy to sister-in-law, so please don't be angry. And whatever you do, don't act like a fool and go ask for it back." Looking at his wife's trembling and terrified little appearance, you felt as if a hand was squeezing your heart, making it feel completely broken. His wife still couldn't fully trust him, always terrified that if she said a single wrong word, you would beat and scold her again. You realized you truly brought this upon yourself through your past sins. Because you didn't speak, Lin Qingxue became even more terrified. Lowering her head like a child who had done something wrong, "Zhengguo, I won't dare do it again. Please don't be angry." Holding your daughter with one hand, you used your other arm to pull your wife into your embrace as well. There were some things you needed to explain thoroughly to your wife. Misunderstandings must never be left overnight. Otherwise, they would only pile up more and more. When a couple lives together, the worst thing is failing to speak properly. Without communication, everything is completely ruined. You patted your wife's back, your chin rubbing against her hair, and said in a very gentle tone, "Wife, I already said that you're the master of our house. You manage the money, and you can do whatever you want. You have the final say. It's just a bag of sugar. If you want to eat it, we can buy more tomorrow. You don't need to care so much about my attitude. I will unconditionally support any decision you make." Upon hearing this at first, Lin Qingxue thought you were throwing a tantrum at her, but you said it over and over again and it didn't seem fake at all. Only then did Lin Qingxue finally believe you. Heaven knows she didn't even dare to breathe heavily just now, fearing this man would suddenly lose his temper. Seeing his wife's breathing gradually steady, you finally let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that, from now on, you would have a heart-to-heart talk with your wife every night. You wanted to take your wife to the city to relax, but you knew she definitely wouldn't be willing, fearing that as soon as they entered the city, you would turn around and sell their daughter. But you still felt it would be better to take your wife out for a walk right now. Wife, do you want to go for a stroll with me? Down at the foot of the mountain? I'll catch a quail for you to satisfy your cravings. Lin Qingshu actually wanted to go. It wasn't that she was greedy and wanted to eat quail. It was just that recently this man wouldn't even let her go to the fields to earn work points anymore, telling her to just stay home, nurse her body, and take good care of the baby. She had gone to work in the fields on the second day after giving birth. Back then, he didn't feel any pity for her, but now he unexpectedly started doting on her. She also didn't know what kind of benefits he had given Wang Xuanzhu, that the two laborers in the family didn't have to work the fields. And Wang Xuanzhu didn't come to urge them either, seeing that his wife was clearly interested but still hesitating, her gaze wavering over those people in the courtyard. You knew she was worried that if they left, the things at home wouldn't be safe. You laughed out loud. It's fine. Wait for a moment. After saying that, you carried the child out of the kitchen. Who knows what you said to those people? But everyone in the main room came out. You even sent Li Tiantian out as well. Li Tiantian actually really wanted to follow this family of 3 to the foot of the mountain to take a look. She heard there were tigers on the mountain, so their group of educated youths didn't dare go near it. But seeing that they didn't really welcome her, she could only wander around aimlessly in the village. On the road, you noticed your wife glancing at you from time to time, hesitating to speak. Stopping your steps, you looked at her with a face full of anticipation. Lin Qingshui plucked up her courage and said, Zheng Guo, can I go back to my parents' home tomorrow? After being married for so long, the man beside her finally looked like a proper human being, knowing to earn money to support the family and take care of his wife and daughter. Lin Qingshuo wanted to return to her parents' home to set her mother's mind at ease, so she wouldn't have to worry anymore about her marrying poorly. You thought your wife had spent so much time building up her courage for something massive, but it turned out to be just this. Holding your daughter with one arm, you used your other hand to hold your wife's hand. Tomorrow, I will go back to your parents' home with you. Just wait for me at home. Counting it up, you had taken quite a bit of money from your mother-in-law in the past. Tomorrow, when you go to the city to sell the dendrobium, the polygonum multiflorum, and some of the venison, it should be enough to pay back the money. You could also buy some gifts for your mother-in-law while you're at it. Lin Qingshui could not have guessed in her wildest dreams that this man would actually say something like this. It was truly an unexpected pleasant surprise. She couldn't help but nod and smile. Not long after you brought her to a lake where wild ducks lived. Stopping your steps, you said, we've arrived. This lake had drowned a dozen mischievous kids in the early years, so the village rumored that water monkeys were hiding inside, making it extremely eerie. So ordinary people would always walk around it, not daring to go anywhere near it easily. But you didn't believe in this superstition at all. Taking off your shirt, you laid it over the grass, so your wife could sit on it while holding the baby and wait. You also didn't forget to sprinkle realgar powder and wormwood powder to keep the bugs away. Lin Qingshui pushed aside the weeds in front of her, and as she looked at the lake reflecting the blue sky, the white clouds, and the surrounding woods, her eyes lit up. Quacking sounds from wild ducks echoed from the bushes. Lin Qingshui couldn't help but ask with excitement, was this where you hunted the wild ducks last time? You nodded and replied, there should be wild duck eggs. This season is exactly when they lay their eggs. While pushing aside the wild grass that was taller than a person, you walked toward the spot where the ducks were quacking. Before you could even get close, the wild ducks in the bushes sensed the movement, flapped their wings, and flew away. Lin Qingshui rubbed her nose out of embarrassment. Oh no, the wild ducks have all run away. You brought her here just to relax anyway, so it didn't really matter. It's fine, you take a rest. I'll go look for them. Sending her back to sit, you walked into the bushes yourself to search carefully. Sure enough, you found quite a few wild duck nests, built with licorice and down feathers, with grayish-green wild duck eggs lying inside. Are there a lot of them? You picked up a few and went back to show her. Having left the house empty-handed, Lin Qingshui now looked at the wild duck eggs and worried. How are we going to carry them back? Even with 4 hands, they could carry a dozen at most. Leaving so many behind that they couldn't take was such a shame for someone who was used to being frugal. Lin Qingshui stood on her tiptoes and scanned the lake, noticing quite a few basket willow trees growing around it. She hurriedly handed her daughter to you. Help me hold our daughter. I have a way. She took out a small knife to cut the willow twigs. Once you understood her intention, you placed your daughter on a tree fork, took out your own knife, and helped cut them. Wife, I can cut them myself. Your hands aren't used to this and you might cut yourself. Just hold our daughter and wait. Your movements were extremely fast, and in no time, you gathered a pile of willow twigs and found a flat area. After stripping away the green leaves, Lin Qingshu began arranging the willow twigs to weave them. You could only stand aside and watch, unable to help out even a single bit. In no time, Lin Qingshui finished weaving the bottom of the basket. Suddenly, as if thinking of something, she looked up at the sky and asked if you were hungry. You shook your head to indicate you weren't. Lin Qingshui rubbed her stomach and smiled sheepishly. But I'm a little hungry. You quickly replied, "I'll go hunting right away and roast a bird for you to eat." "No need." Lin Qingshu took out 2 mantou buns from her cloth bag. "I brought some buns along. We can eat them once they're warmed up. You should have some too." You glanced at the cloth bag, then gave a slow nod. Lin Qingshu smiled so widely her eyes curved like crescent moons, cutting some licorice grass by the lake, building a small campfire, and placing the buns over the fire to heat them up. After telling you to watch the fire, she went to the side to weave the basket again, not letting herself rest for even a moment. Her speed was incredibly fast. Just as the fragrance of the roasted buns burst forth, the basket was already fully woven. She leaned in front of you to show it off. "Look, isn't it nice?" "It looks amazing. My wife is so skillful." You looked up to give it a glance, then took down the roasted buns and handed them to her. "Eat up." Lin Qingshu put down the basket, washed her hands with the lake water, and the two of them sat on a dead tree by the lake, enjoying the mountain breeze and the autumn sun. They ate the roasted buns bite by bite. After finishing your food, you stood up and picked up the basket, heading into the bushes alone to gather the wild duck eggs. This mountain forest rarely saw human visitors all year round, so the wild ducks had far fewer natural predators and were breeding exceptionally well. In just the short amount of time Lin Qingshui took to eat, you managed to gather a whole basket full. From the looks of it, you could easily gather another 2 baskets. Having secured 1 full basket, Lin Qingshui wasn't greedy. This much is plenty. Having these is more than enough. Wait here for a little bit. I'm going to head a bit deeper into the woods. Let's see if I can hunt some other game. You dived straight into the dense forest. Holding the child in her arms, Lin Qingshui kept her eyes glued to the man in the distant bushes, seeing his head pop up from time to time as he crawled on the ground, moving carefully. Whenever he was crawling flat in the bushes, her heart would leap into her throat. Could there be snakes in such deep grass? What if he gets bitten by a snake? The more she thought about it, the more she regretted letting him go, the wait becoming agonizingly long and making her grow increasingly anxious. The next time he popped his head up, she yelled anxiously toward the bushes, "Come back up here quickly. I don't need to eat quail anymore." But the distance was simply too far, so you didn't hear her at all, diving right back into the thicket once again. Lin Qingshu became even more restless, holding the baby, bending down to pick up your shirt from the ground to clutch it in her hand, and standing at the foot of the mountain staring intently at the distance. Because you had brought your wife along and were only at the foot of the mountain, you didn't use a hunting rifle, choosing to use a slingshot instead. This was no ordinary item. It was custom forged by heating and bending rebar, undergoing countless rounds of polishing and fine-tuning, with the band specially made from premium cowhide rubber. Holding it in your hand felt incredibly heavy and solid. Your gaze was as sharp as an eagle's, scanning the sky intently to search for a target. Finally, amidst the very last glow of the setting sun, a large wild goose slowly flew into your line of sight, flapping its wings as if rushing back to its nest. You're the one. Taking a deep breath, you steadied your mind and slowly raised the slingshot. A slingshot's range is naturally limited, and the wild goose was flying exceptionally high, but you had your own way. You fired a rapid 3-shot combo. The first stone shot up into the air. The second stone followed closely behind and slammed into the first one, and the third stone instantly struck the first 2. Carrying the roaring sound of breaking through the air, it shot straight toward that figure about to vanish at the edge of the sky. Ultimately propelled by the kinetic impact of the latter 2 stones, the first stone accurately struck the wing of the wild goose. The wild goose's body shuddered violently, and it lost its balance. After spiraling in the air, it plummeted down powerlessly. An indescribable surge of excitement and pride welled up in your heart. He tightly gripped the slingshot, his gaze following the falling wild goose, until it landed securely on the grass not far away. When you carried the wild goose and started walking down, you noticed your wife holding the child and hurrying up the mountain. Seeing this, your heart instantly leaped into your throat. The mountain path was incredibly slippery, so you quickly called out to stop the danger. "Don't walk up here." The sudden voice startled Lin Qingshui into stopping her steps immediately. With a slight tremble in her voice, she shouted toward you, "Come down quickly. I don't want to eat quail anymore. I will never eat it again. Just come down right now." By the time she finished speaking, the rims of her eyes had turned completely red. She had been waiting by the bushes and saw no movement on the mountain for a long time. Heaven knows how terrified she was at that moment, fearing what she would do if this man met with an accident in the mountains. She simply didn't dare to imagine it. You also noticed that something was wrong with your wife, so how could you still be in the mood for hunting? You quickly called back in response, "I'm coming out right now. Stand right there and don't move." As you spoke, you hurriedly made your way down to the foot of the mountain. Carrying the wild goose, you strode right up to your wife, staring at her bloodshot eyes and asking, "What's wrong? Are you cold? Come on, let's head home." Lin Qingshu didn't say a single word, turning around to walk ahead while holding the child, her restless and terrified heart unable to calm down for a long time. You had absolutely no idea why your wife had suddenly become unhappy. She was perfectly fine when they left the house, yet in just a short amount of time, her expression had completely changed. Several times you wanted to open your mouth to start a conversation, and wanted to ask for your coat and pants back. But seeing your wife with a long face holding the child, not even giving you a direct glance, you had no choice. You could only go bare-chested, wearing nothing but big boxer shorts, carrying the wild goose and a basket of duck eggs in your hands, following closely behind your wife. Passing by Old Man Lee's house entrance, Old Man Lee was squatting on the threshold smoking his pipe. He spotted Zhao the Fourth's wife walking ahead holding the child, with Fourth's clothes tightly clutched in her hand. Looking back at Fourth, with his tall stature of over 1.8 meters, he was following submissively behind his wife, looking completely deflated like a frostbitten eggplant. Why hadn't anyone noticed before that Zhao the Fourth, who used to swagger around like a crab outside, would actually turn out to be such a coward in front of his wife? As the young couple walked up to him, Old Man Lee couldn't help but tease, "Fourth, what happened to you? Did your wife give you a scolding?" You craned your neck to sneak a glance at your wife. Unable to see her facial expression, you only caught a glimpse of a section of her fair neck, so you quickly retracted your gaze. You flashed a smile at Old Man Lee, but firmly stood there, not daring to utter a single word. The two of them, one after the other, returned to their front gate. You tossed the wild goose in your hand onto the ground and rushed ahead of her to open the courtyard gate. Once the gate opened, you sensibly stood aside, waiting for your wife to go in before you bent down to pick up the wild goose and followed her into the house. Lin King Xue was almost amused by your comical behavior. Managing to hold back her laughter with great difficulty, she sat down on a stool in the courtyard holding the child. Only at this moment did she realize she was still holding his shirt in her hand. He was bare-chested, wearing nothing but a pair of shorts, and had followed her all the way back just like that. Suddenly remembering Old Man Lee's teasing words just now, she wondered why she had thrown a tantrum at him, even forgetting to give him his clothes. She secretly glanced at that man, seeing that he wasn't angry either, and was quietly fetching water. She then stood up and said to you, "Don't wash yourself with that cold water. I'll go boil some hot water for you." As she spoke, she held her daughter with one hand struggling to open the door, wanting to put her daughter down on the small bed inside the room. Hearing your wife taking the initiative to speak to you, your energy instantly surged. You turned your head around, noticing your wife holding their daughter while struggling to fiddle with the lock. You hurriedly put down the water basin and rushed over in a few steps. Walking up behind your wife, you took over the key, inserted it into the keyhole, and quickly unlocked the door. You looked down at your wife nestled against your chest, feeling incredibly delighted in your heart. "You look after our daughter. I'll take a quick shower and then cook for you." Lin Qingxue didn't say a word. As soon as the door opened, she carried the baby into the room, placed her sleeping daughter onto the small bed, tucked her in with a little blanket, and lifted the curtain to walk back out. Catching sight of that man bareback, splashing cold water all over his body, she lost any bit of temper she had left, thinking to herself, "Let him freeze to death. Whatever." She walked over, picked up his shirt from the stool, and just sat right there, waiting for him to finish washing and head inside. Lin Qingxue then took his clothes and walked over to the well, lifting a bucket to draw water and starting to scrub his shirt and pants. As she washed, she wondered about their trip to the city tomorrow, debating if she should take their daughter to the town first, to pick out a couple of thicker clothes for him. It was already autumn, and the weather was cooling down day by day, yet he still wore that thin shirt all day long, running off into the mountains before dawn. The temperature in the mountains early in the morning was low with heavy dew, so how did he not feel the cold at all? Every day he came back, his pants were covered in mud spots, and his shirt was also stained with dirt, likely from crawling on the ground while digging up medicinal herbs. You gave yourself a quick rinse, your tall, athletic body dripping wet. Carrying a chill with you, you strode forward and bent down to enter the room. You grabbed the towel your wife used, carelessly wiped the water stains off your body, changed into a clean set of clothes, and stepped back out. Glancing over, you saw that the clothes you wore today had already been washed clean, making your heart feel incredibly warm. The feeling of having someone wash your clothes was truly wonderful, and having a wife was just amazing. You gutted the wild goose you just caught and cleaned its organs, deciding to stir-fry half and stew the other half into a soup for your wife to drink. When Li Tiantian came back, she happened to see you preparing a bird, while her little sister-in-law was hanging up her big brother's clothes and pants to dry. This scene once again completely refreshed her impression of you. Just as Lin Qingxue set things down, Auntie Zhang from the east end of the village came over in a tearing hurry. Her eldest daughter was about to get married, so she needed to find someone literate to take a look at. Things like the gift list that required formal writing, so she thought of Lin Qingxue and hurried over to call her to help out. Li Tiantian didn't want to stay together with a grown man completely alone, all by themselves, just to avoid the villagers gossiping, so she also tagged along to lend a hand. After finishing your meal, you started working on processing the badger fat. This is a precious medicinal ingredient, possessing great moisturizing and skin repairing properties, with remarkable effects on treating burns and frostbite. Seeing that it was pitch black outside, and so dark that you couldn't see your own hand, you locked the door. Cradling the baby in your arms, you walked across more than half the village to Auntie Zhang's house. As soon as Lin Qingxue saw you walking over holding the child, she thought something had gone horribly wrong, and quickly put down the work in her hands. She walked up in front of you, looked down at the baby in your arms, and asked, "What's going on?" You looked at your wife and smiled. Nothing, just came over to take a look. As you spoke, you found a small wooden stool and plopped down. Auntie Zhang was a shrewd woman who immediately read between the lines, grinning from ear to ear, and said to Lin Qingshui, "Your family's fourth brother. He's probably afraid you'd get scared walking on the night path. He couldn't stay at ease, so he specially came to pick you up." Hearing Auntie Zhang's words, Lin Qingshui glanced at the man sitting on the stool, wondering if that was really the case. Auntie Zhang just loved teasing people, so how could she take these words seriously? Besides, even if he knew she was afraid of the dark, didn't Tiantian come along with her anyway? There was no need for him to make this trip from so far away. Thinking of this, Lin Qingshui said to the man sitting on the stool, "You just sit and rest for a bit. I'll be done very soon." After saying that, she went back to the table and lowered her head to get busy. You let out a grunt of agreement. While speaking, your eyeballs seemed to be glued onto your wife, staring straight at her every single move. At this time, Zhang Tiejun, munching on a cornbread bun, pulled up a stool and sat down next to you, fourth brother. "I think sister-in-law is truly spectacular, even more beautiful than sister Hui, knowledgeable and highly cultured too." Hearing Zhang Tiejun's words, you dazed out for a moment. It took quite a while before you snapped out of it, finally remembering who Zhang Hui was. You were completely puzzled. Why did Tiejun suddenly bring her up out of nowhere? Seeing that you didn't say anything, Zhang Tiejun thought that his fourth brother was still thinking about Zhang Hui in his heart. Now he grew anxious. If that was the case, then his sister-in-law was truly being wronged too much. Sister-in-law held a heart full of genuine affection for brother Zheng Guo. Even when the house was dirt poor and penniless, she still stayed fully committed to living her life with him. Just how deep was this affection? Thinking up to this point, Zhang Tiejun opened his mouth to advise, "Fourth brother, you shouldn't keep thinking about her either. Live a proper life with my sister-in-law. I heard sister Hui found a boyfriend in the city, who seemingly works in the back kitchen of a state-owned restaurant. Now every time she comes back, her eyes are practically at the top of her head, not even giving people a direct look." His tone was filled with complete dissatisfaction. Zhang Tiejun looked down on Zhang Hui from the bottom of his heart, feeling that she was just relying on her somewhat decent looks to act incredibly arrogant, practically looking down her nose at everyone when she spoke. When it came to appearance, how could Zhang Hui ever compare to fourth brother's current wife Zhang Tiejun? Wished even in his dreams that he could have the same amazing good fortune as fourth brother, marrying a fair-skinned and beautiful wife. Just look at fourth sister-in-law's figure. How did it look like someone who had given birth to a child? She was as tender as the freshly picked cucumber, so fresh and radiant, truly making anyone's heart itch with just a single glance. Who on earth was this shameless person spreading rumors, saying that you had taken a fancy to someone like Zhang Hui? A woman of her caliber isn't even worthy of carrying my shoes. Whether in my past life or this life, when have I ever given her a direct look? How did this groundless matter get rumored all over the village? If these words were heard by his wife, wouldn't it create a massive misunderstanding? You had been staring at your wife just now, and seeing that she hadn't glanced at you from start to finish, your heart felt even more uncomfortable. At such a close distance, it was absolutely impossible that she didn't hear it. Could it be that his wife really didn't care about him anymore? Thinking up to this point, you felt a heavy suffocation in your chest, and you no longer gave Zhang Tiejun a pleasant expression. When did I ever think about her? Which of your eyes saw me thinking about her? Seeing you in this stance, Zhang Tiejun was scared out of his wits like a coward, quickly flashing a pleading smile. "Fourth brother, I just said it casually like that. Why are you getting so worked up?" From the bottom of his heart, he was still exceptionally afraid of you. You were, after all, a notorious hoodlum dog known throughout the neighboring villages, and anyone who saw you had to tuck their tail and take a detour. If it hadn't been for saving sister-in-law, how could you ever marry such a great woman like her? Seeing his pathetic cowardice, you knew talking was useless, and you didn't feel like wasting any more breath on him. Roaring irritably, "Get the hell out of here!" Zhang Tiejun grabbed his stool and scrambled away at top speed. Their conversation was heard by Lin Qingshui entirely without missing a single word. She gripped the handle so hard that her knuckles turned white. No wonder he seemed like a completely changed person recently. It turned out that the person hidden in his heart had found a new lover, which was why he finally planned to live a proper life with her and shut everyone's mouths. A wave of deep sorrow surged within Lin Qingshui's heart, making her feel horribly miserable. On the way home, you didn't even care that you were holding the child in your arms, nor did you care about the third wheel, Li Tiantian, walking right beside you. You eagerly followed behind your wife to explain, "Wife, don't listen to Zhang Tiejun's foul mouth talking nonsense. I don't have half a cent's worth of a relationship with that Zhang Hui. I would never look down on a woman of her caliber. My heart only holds you and you alone." Your tone was so earnest that you were just short of pointing to the heavens to make a vicious oath. Li Tiantian followed a few paces behind, her ears perked up like antennas, listening to this wonderful drama with pure curiosity. She stared at your tall physique, walking beside her little sister-in-law, your back bent low like a shrimp. Just how terrified was he that his wife would misunderstand him? Did this count as lacking husbandly authority and being completely henpecked? Seeing that your wife still ignored you, your heart, was filled with anxious uncertainty, unable to guess what she actually meant. You could only droop your head and silently follow her back home. After arriving home, you gently placed the sleeping child onto the small bed, covered her with the blanket, and then, looking like a frostbitten eggplant, sluggishly headed to the kitchen to boil water. His tall body squatted by the opening of the cooking stove, holding a stick in his hand, poking the fire while cursing under his breath. If I find out who that foul-mouthed bastard is spreading rumors behind my back and stirring up trouble, I'll beat him so hard even his own mother won't recognize him. Having nothing better to do than spread gossip. Isn't this just making life miserable for me? At this moment, Lin Qingxue was sitting on a stool in the east room, stitch by stitch working for her daughter to sew a cotton-padded jacket for the winter. In no time at all, you walked inside with large strides, carrying a basin of steaming hot water. Bending down, you gently placed the water basin right by your wife's feet, and then squatted down, your large hand clasping her slender ankle, while your other hand moved to take off her shoes. This very action made Lin Qingxue halt the needlework in her hands. She looked up at the man squatting in front of her, asking, "What are you doing?" As she spoke, she wanted to pull her ankle back, but the strength in his hands was immense. She couldn't break free at all as his rough, warm palms rubbed against the skin of her ankle, making it feel quite ticklish. In the past, she could always read his temper perfectly, but now she found it a bit impossible to figure out exactly what was going on in his mind. With your head lowered, you didn't stop your movements, taking off the cloth shoes from your wife's feet, and said in a low voice, "Wife, you've been tired out all day. Let me soak your feet to relieve some of that fatigue." Seeing that she couldn't break free, Lin Qingxue simply gave up the struggle. With her eyelids slightly lowered, she quietly watched the man before her, letting him take off the shoes from her feet. The moment her feet were placed into the perfectly warm water, her heart also warmed up. Your changes over these past few days were just too massive, especially right now, when you would actually take the initiative to help wash her feet. If this were in the past, it would be something she wouldn't even dare dream of. Yet it was actually happening. This sudden action made Lin Qingxue halt the needlework in her hands. She looked up at the man squatting in front of her, asking, "What are you doing?" As she spoke, she tried to pull her ankle back, but the strength in your hand was massive, so she couldn't break free at all. Your rough, warm palm rubbed against the skin of her ankle, making it feel a little ticklish. In the past, she could always see through his temperament, but now she was somewhat unable to fathom what on earth he was thinking. Keeping your head down, you didn't stop the movements of your hands, taking off the cloth shoes from your wife's feet, and said in a low, muffled voice, "Wife, you've been tired all day. Let me soak your feet to relieve some of your fatigue." Seeing that she couldn't break free, Lin Qingxue simply gave up struggling, her eyes lowering slightly as she quietly watched the man in front of her, allowing him to take off her shoes. As her feet were placed into the perfectly warm water basin, her heart also warmed up along with it. Your changes over these past few days had been far too massive, especially right now, where you would actually take the initiative to help wash her feet. If it were in the past, this was something she wouldn't even dare to imagine in her dreams. But you have to give me a chance to turn over a new leaf. Trust me, okay? These words of yours made Lin Qingxue's stiff body gradually relax. With every breath, she was surrounded by the warm scent of your body, mixed with crisp, refreshing hormones, making Lin Qingxue's heart feel incredibly warm. After a long while, she gave a barely audible murmur, "I know. I know." The sound was so soft it was almost undetectable, but you heard it. Early the next morning, before dawn, you got up and set out for the town, catching the earliest bus to the city. This time, you didn't go to the same pharmacy as last time, as selling things like dendrobium and deer antlers too frequently. At the exact same pharmacy could easily get you targeted by people with bad intentions, so you chose to go to a completely different pharmacy instead. After the person in charge saw the items you wanted to sell, they could be absolutely certain that you were the young man who had recently sold some top-tier goods. With a welcoming smile, they led you into a private room and carefully examined the items you brought over. There were no issues at all. Although they didn't know how you managed to have a constant supply of goods, they had heard about you before, so they didn't try to lowball the price. You also didn't expect this transaction to go so smoothly. Counting the thick stack of 10 yuan bills in your hand and confirming the amount was correct, you stuffed them into your pocket space and went straight to the state-owned department store. You went inside preparing to pick out some nutritional supplements for your mother-in-law, but unexpectedly crossed paths with a great benefactor from your past life, Secretary Wang. Except you didn't know why he would appear in this small county town right now. Looking at him, he was still very young and in his absolute prime, which stirred up some memories of your past life. In less than 10 years, this man would move to S City and be promoted to the top position. You originally wanted to go up and greet him, but in this lifetime, the two of you hadn't met yet, so you didn't know each other at all. Going up to greet him out of the blue would seem very bizarre. After thinking it over, you decided to let it go. If it was meant to be, you would meet him again in S City anyway. After all, for your future development, you would still choose S City, which was the very city where you had lived for decades in your past life. As you picked picked out your items and were preparing to leave carrying them. You heard a loud commotion coming from Secretary Wang's side, with a crowd of people gathered around to watch the drama. You halted your steps, turned around and walked over in that direction. The female sales clerk behind the counter was grabbing the sleeve of Wang Xingjun, who was wearing a yellow coat, and shouting loudly, "Hey! I say, how can you be so unreasonable? If you break something, you pay the retail price. You think you can just leave without paying?" When Wang Xingjun turned around just now, his clothes had caught on the counter, causing a Plum Blossom brand watch to fall to the ground and break. He was an educated man, and seeing the counter clerk's fiercely arrogant posture, his face flushed red as he explained, "Comrade, you've misunderstood. I wasn't trying to run away. I don't have enough money on me, but my car is right outside. I'll go out, grab the money, and bring it over to you. This is my work ID. I'll leave it with you as collateral for now." The counter clerk took his ID and glanced at it, her face filled with pure disdain. "Who are you trying to fool with? A fake ID? If you walk out this main door and run away, who am I supposed to talk to? Are you trying to make me pay for it out of my own pocket?" As she spoke, she carelessly threw the ID onto the ground. You bent down, picked up the work ID from the ground, and handed it back to Wang Xingjun. Turning your gaze toward the female clerk, you asked, "How much is it? I'll pay for him." The female clerk sized you up from head to toe, letting out an incredibly contemptuous laugh. "Do you even know how much money this is?" This country bumpkin just flaps his lips and dares to talk big. "It's 127 yuan and 50 cents in total. Hand over the money then." As she spoke, she held out her hand. Without saying a single word, you pulled out a stack of 10 yuan bills from your pocket, handed them to the female clerk and said, "Give me the change." Looking at the money in her hand, the female clerk repeatedly counted it in shocked astonishment. Nodding her head, she said, "All right, comrade, please wait a moment." Seeing that there was no more drama to watch, the people around let out a wave of boos and suddenly dispersed. Wang Xingjun adjusted the glasses on the bridge of his nose, his eyes looking at the man in front of him who was a head taller than himself. With so many onlookers just now, not a single person was willing to speak up for him. Yet this man had bailed him out without a second thought, helping him out of this tight spot. Looking at his clothes, he didn't seem like a wealthy person, so this sum of money was definitely not a small amount for him. Thinking up to this point, Wang Xingjun felt incredibly grateful to the stranger in his heart. There are still plenty of good people in this world. Thank you so much for helping me out of that bind just now. I have money in my car, and it's parked right outside. Could I trouble you to come with me to go get it? You gave a nod and walked out together with Wang Xingjun. Sure enough, you saw a black sedan parked by the side of the road. Driving a sedan in this era, it seemed the rumors about his powerful background were completely true. Wang Xingjun opened the car door, took a bag out of the car, counted out the money and handed it to you, "Little brother, thanks again." "Where are you heading? Let me give you a ride." You took the money and stuffed it into your pocket without even counting it. Thinking about how you were carrying so many things, taking the regular bus was indeed not as convenient as taking his car. So you didn't stand on ceremony with him. "Then I'll trouble you." You then gave your home address to Wang Xingjun and climbed into the passenger seat. On the way, two people who ordinarily had absolutely no intersection in life were chatting away, and there was no awkward silence at all. On the contrary, it was like old acquaintances who hadn't met in years, chatting incredibly hit it off. Wang Xingjun originally thought this young man was just an ordinary person, but during the chat, he realized that wasn't the case at all. This person seemed deep and unpredictable. Despite being so young, he possessed a calmness that shouldn't belong to this age. He couldn't help but feel that this man wasn't as simple as he appeared on the surface. A thought couldn't help but rise in his mind. Perhaps this man might achieve great things in the future. The car drove up to the courtyard gate, and you leaned forward to step out of the car. Then you took the nutritional supplements you bought for your mother-in-law out from the trunk. Bending down, you thanked Wang Xingjun inside the car. Wang Xingjun flashed a smile and replied, "No problem, brother. We'll meet again if fate allows." As he spoke, he glanced at the broken mud brick house behind you, then turned the car around and drove away. Carried the things and entered the house, and immediately spotted your wife holding a man's coat in her hands. You walked forward and placed the things you were carrying on the table. Noticing that your wife wanted to hide the clothes behind her back, you were quick with your eyes and hands, snatching that blue coat from her hand in one swift motion. Grinning, you asked, "Wife, did you buy this for me?" As you spoke, you threw the coat right onto your body. Seeing you put the coat on, and seeing that the collar wasn't fixed properly, Lin Qingshui subconsciously stepped forward, stood on her tiptoes, and raised her arms, reaching out to adjust the collar for you. After fixing it, she took a few steps back and sized you up from head to toe. The shoulder width and overall size were perfectly fitting, looking as if it had been custom made. Hesitating for a brief moment, she opened her mouth to explain, "I saw the weather cooling down, so I took our daughter to town and bought a new coat for you." Hearing this and noticing her dodging eyes, you understood in your heart that she lacked confidence, worrying about this and that. Your heart was filled with absolute joy. Her taking the initiative to buy clothes for you was truly a first. Taking a step forward, you reached out and pulled her into your embrace. "Thank you, my wife. I really love this coat." While speaking, you finally realize there was still a massive third wheel in the room. Tian was holding the child in her arms, her two eyes staring wide like copper bells. When she saw you kissing her little sister-in-law, she was completely dumbfounded. With a grown person like herself standing right in the room, could it be that you failed to notice her yet again? Right now, having just witnessed something she shouldn't have. Would she develop styes in her eyes? When on Earth could she return to the city to see her own older brother? While her mind was wandering, her face flushed red as she forced out a fake smile, hurriedly carrying the child into the west room where she stayed. Lin Qingshua's breathing became uneven from your kiss, leaning limply against your firm chest, listening to your strong, powerful heartbeat. She softly opened her mouth and asked, "Have you eaten? Are you hungry? I'll cook for you." Holding your wife, you walked into the east room where you slept, then guided her to sit on a stool and pulled out the cloth bag. Then you pressed her down to sit on the stool and put the close-fitting items away that you had kept close to your body. Keep this safe and put it away. Lin Qingshui looked up at the man, then retracted her gaze and opened the cloth bag which still carried his body heat. The moment she saw that it was completely filled with 10 yuan bills, she hurriedly clutched the cloth bag tightly, anxiously glanced at the doorway, and after confirming there was no one outside the door, she stood up and lowered her voice to ask, "Why is there so much?" Her voice carried a hint of fear. The money you brought back was getting more and more each time, making her feel both delighted and terrified in her heart, truly fearing that you were doing some bad, shady dealings behind her back. Staring at your wife's cute expression, you couldn't help but burst into laughter. This is barely the beginning. The money we make in the future will only increase. You let out a soft sigh, as the happiness you had right now felt just like a dream. You squatted in front of your wife, locking eyes with her. "All right, wife, if you don't feel secure about it. Next time I head into the city, you come along with me, okay? You can just see for yourself exactly where the money comes from." Hearing you say this, Lin Qingshui stared straight at the man in front of her. After looking for quite a while, she finally nodded her head. Seeing that she agreed, you couldn't help but lean in, giving her another kiss on her forehead, and then said, "All right, pack it all up properly, but leave 200 yuan out for me. I'm going to borrow a bicycle and take you back to your parents' home in a bit." As you spoke, you turned around, lifted the curtain, and walked out. After you went out, Lin Qingshui looked at the thick stack of 10 yuan bills in her hand, her eyes scanning around the room, feeling that nowhere seemed safe enough to store it. Her heart was completely uneasy. Hiding alone in the room, she found several spots but felt none of them were safe. She checked her previous money hiding spots all over again, counted the amount, and after confirming everything was correct, she fell into deep worry again, having no idea what kind of place would be safe enough to hide this sum of money. You didn't manage to borrow a bicycle. Returning to the courtyard, you plopped down on a stone stool, pulled a cigarette out of your pocket, struck a match, lit the cigarette, and took a deep, heavy drag. Exhaling the smoke into the twilight breeze, you thought about how taking your wife and child out without any means of transportation simply wouldn't do. It didn't matter how far you had to walk on your own two legs, but you absolutely couldn't let your wife and child suffer along with you. You originally wanted to borrow a bicycle to take them to her parents' home, but forgot just how precious and rare this item was in this era. They themselves are usually reluctant to ride it, so how could they possibly lend it to an outsider? You had only been thinking about building a house to improve the living conditions, and completely forgot about the matter of having a means of transportation for going out. After hiding the money, Lin Qingshui walked out of the room. Noticing you sitting in the yard smoking and not seeing a bicycle, she knew that you didn't manage to borrow one. She opened her mouth and said, "It's fine if we walk back. We always used to walk back anyway." You gave a nod, letting out a muffled grunt of agreement while making up your mind that you must make more money as quickly as possible. There were just too many things that needed to be bought for the house. Around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Lin's mother was washing clothes in the courtyard. A next-door neighbor walked in and shouted excitedly, "Auntie, stop washing. I saw your daughter and son-in-law coming back." More than half the village knew very well what kind of trash her daughter had married. Hearing the neighbor's words, Lin's mother quickly stood up, wiped her hands on the apron around her waist, and hurriedly walked out. She wondered what it was about this time and if they were here to sponge off them again. She came to the door, catching sight of her daughter and son-in-law walking toward her house. She had no idea why the two of them came together today, and also noticed her son-in-law carrying large and small bags in his hands. Filled with deep anxiety, she went out to greet them, first sizing up her daughter carefully. Seeing her wearing a brand new set of clothes, with a bright smile overflowing on her youthful fair face, looking completely different from her previous sorrowful look. Her heart, which had been hanging in her throat, finally settled back down. Spotting her son-in-law carrying malted milk extract, canned fruits, along with such a large piece of meat, a wild chicken, and a whole bunch of duck eggs, she knew at a glance that this must have cost a lot of money. Thinking about their financial situation, she couldn't help but complain. "Since you're returning to your own home, you two could have just come over. Why bring so many things?" As she spoke, she quickly took the child from her daughter's arms. Lin Qingshuo carried a shallow smile on her face and didn't say a word. Every time they came in the past, they came empty-handed and returned fully loaded. This was actually the very first time since their marriage that they brought things back to her parents' home. Although she didn't say anything along the way, the sheer delight in her heart was truly beyond words. Looking at your mother-in-law in front of you, you respectfully called out Mom. Being called that by you, Lin's mother felt an unnatural flutter in her heart and squeezed out a smile, hurriedly ushering you both into the house. The nearby neighbors also gathered around to watch the commotion. Staring at the changes in you two, for a moment, they could hardly believe their own eyes. This couple both had incredible looks, and now matched with these outfits, anyone who didn't know better would think you two were wealthy city folks, coming down to the countryside to visit relatives. But as a neighbor, she knew better than anyone else that your house was dirt poor and penniless, living a completely tight and strapped life. Lin's mother led her son-in-law and daughter into the house. The neighbor's shocked expression just now was something she had seen clearly. The pride in her heart swelled up. She could finally hold her head high for once. Since her daughter had a bad life after getting married, she had been the butt of people's jokes quite often. But now she could finally vent that grievance. Staring at her daughter's outfit, it was no longer those ragged old and ill-fitting clothes from before. She was covered in brand new clothes from head to toe, and even wore rubber-soled shoes on her feet, which looked like high-end goods at a glance. Then, looking at her son-in-law, he was no longer that impatient, petty and stingy man from before. Now his every gesture exuded pure steadiness, looking like a completely changed person. So much so that she almost didn't dare recognize him. No wonder her daughter said he had changed. By the looks of it, he had truly changed for the better. After sitting down, Lin Qingshui asked, Mom, where is my brother? Lin's mother looked down at the baby in her arms, smoothing out her little clothes, and replied with a smile, He took the other child to town. I reckon he should be back very soon. Just as her voice fell, they saw Li Mingliang pushing that 28-inch heavy-duty bicycle, returning covered in travel dust. On the road, he had heard the villagers saying that his sister had brought the child over. He wasn't sure if you had started throwing a tantrum again. If it weren't for his older sister, why would she have ever married this dirt-poor penniless Zhao Zhengguo, who had nothing left going for him except the title of being her savior? After parking his heavy-duty 28-inch bicycle, he walked into the room and saw you were there too, and his expression instantly darkened. Lin's mother noticed her son's expression and understood exactly what was going on in his mind, hurriedly smoothing things over. Son, Zhengguo bought a whole bunch of things to come visit me. Li Mingliang glanced at that pile of various items on the table and couldn't help but let out a cold snort. He pulled over a stool and plopped right down on it. Furious, he wanted to give his brother-in-law a harsh piece of his mind, but was also afraid of making his old mother unhappy. You knew very well that the scoundrel things you did in the past had left your brother-in-law full of grievances against you, so you didn't expect to be greeted with a pleasant face at all. Therefore, you weren't the least bit surprised by Li Mingliang's current attitude. At this moment, Zhao Xiaoyan walked in holding the child. The moment she spotted her younger brother, a trace of worry flashed across her eyes, but she still forced out a reluctant smile. She didn't know if her younger brother's visit this time was to sponge off them yet again. Every time he came, it was either to borrow money or borrow things, making her unable to hold her head up in her husband's family. Although her own man had never yelled at her because of Zhengguo's antics, it was precisely because of this that she felt even more ashamed. She wanted to mention that the last time he came to borrow money, he had even given her husband a severe beating, but the words died right at the tip of her tongue. Catching sight of the deep resentment in your third sister's eyes, you felt incredibly uncomfortable in your heart, knowing perfectly well that over the past 2 years, your third sister also had a rough time at her husband's house because of you. Remembering how in your past life, after your wife jumped into the river with your daughter, everyone in the family cut ties with you. Yet it was only your third sister who, right when you were leaving, secretly stuffed 20 yuan into your hand, along with a few warm, hard-boiled eggs. So after you struck it rich, knowing your third sister was caught in a dilemma at her husband's house because of your family, you didn't dare make contact with her either. Later on, you heard from a fellow villager that your sister and brother-in-law wanted to start a small business, so you bought the storefront they had their eyes on, and then rented it out to them at a dirt cheap price. For a moment, the room fell into complete silence. Lin Qingshui also sensed that the atmosphere was a bit off. Over these past 2 years, the family had indeed relied on her parents' support just to barely scratch by. She felt around her pocket and pulled out a stack of 10 yuan bills. Earlier, she didn't know what you wanted her to do with this money, but on the way here, you told her that this 200 yuan was meant to pay back the debts owed to her mother-in-law and her younger brother. Hearing this, Lin's mother was quite surprised in her heart. When this guy borrowed money in the past, it was like throwing meat to a dog. It never came back. She had never once expected him to pay back what he borrowed, and only hoped he would just cause fewer troubles. Mom Zhengguo told me to give this to you. As Lin Qingshui spoke, she stuffed the money into her mother's pocket. Seeing so much money, Lin's mother panicked in her heart. She quickly freed up her hand from holding the child and stuffed the money right back to her daughter. Put it away quickly. Why are you carrying so much money on you? What if you lose it? Her tone carried a hint of blame. You didn't expect your mother-in-law to react so strongly. So you quickly opened your mouth and said, "Mom, you absolutely must take this money. I was immature in the past, but from now on I will live a proper life with Qing Shui. If you don't accept this money, my heart won't be at peace." Lin's mother's pupils contracted slightly, completely unable to understand what on earth had happened. During these short few days, that could make a person completely turn over a new leaf. She shifted her gaze toward her daughter, and seeing her smile to signal that she should accept the money. Only then, with a heart filled with nervous uncertainty, did she tuck the money away. "Mom will save this money for you two first. Whenever you need it, you can come and get it from me anytime," Lin's mother said. Li Mingliang stared at you, also completely bewildered, his mind constantly filled with doubts. Then looking at his older sister dressed so radiantly and neatly, with a bright light shining in her eyes, no longer looking lifeless like before. Since his sister had put it this way, he would trust you just one more time. So he turned his head and instructed his wife, Yan Er, to go make a few side dishes to go with the alcohol. Hearing that they were going to drink Lin Qing instantly grew a bit anxious and said, "Brother, we still have to head back later. With so much money left at home, she wouldn't feel at ease with nobody watching over it. Furthermore, she was deathly afraid that if you drank too much, you would start throwing a drunk tantrum again." Li Mingliang waved his hand. "It's fine. Sister, the two of us will just drink a little bit. It won't delay you from going home." Seeing that she couldn't reason with her younger brother Lin Qing stared right at you, hoping that you wouldn't drink. Receiving the signal from your wife, you grinned widely, showing a mouthful of big white teeth. "It's fine. Wife, put your heart completely at ease. I know my limits when I drink." Hearing this, Lin Qing felt a bit displeased in her heart. After giving you a sharp glare, she took her nephew from her sister-in-law's arms and sat to the side with a sullen look, not saying another single word. Zhao Xiaoyan got busy, setting up a table for them in the courtyard, and brought out the liquor that her own man had hidden away. Neither of the two men said a single word of nonsense. They poured the liquor, clinked their bowls together, and gulped it down silently in one go. Sitting in the main room, Lin Qing held her little nephew absent-mindedly, uneasily glancing outside from time to time. Watching the way her brother and you were downing the alcohol, she was practically unable to sit still. Lin's mother saw every single move of her daughter. Seeing her care so much about you, it seemed the young couple had been getting along quite well these past few days. Seeing her like this, she could truly put her mind at rest. As for the two big men in the yard, only after a bowl of liquor went down did their conversation slowly open up. Li Mingliang exhaled a heavy breath of alcohol. His cheeks flushed with an unnatural red, and his eyes looked a bit dazed. He raised his arm, draped it over your shoulder, and said, "Brother-in-law, today I'm only willing to sit here and drink this liquor with you for my sister's sake. Only then would I be willing to sit here and drink this liquor with you. I won't mention your past misdeeds, but I only hope that from now on, you will treat my sister well. Otherwise, even if I have to risk this life of mine, I won't let you get away with it." The bond between the Lin siblings ran deep. In your past life, after Lin Qing jumped into the river, Li Mingliang beat you half to death. If Lin's mother hadn't stopped him out of fear that her son would end up in prison, your brother-in-law would have beaten you to death alive. To avenge his sister, you gave a nod and didn't say a word. Picking up the bowl, throwing your head back, and downing the 2 tails of strong liquor inside, all in one breath. The alcohol was incredibly harsh and pungent, flowing down your throat and burning a fiery heat right into your stomach. Lin Qingxiu could no longer sit still, walking out while holding the child and shouting at you, "Hey, are you still going home or not?" Hearing your wife's words, you quickly put down the liquor bowl, a smile breaking across your handsome face. No more drinking. This tiny amount of liquor was nothing to you. But whether it was because you were too happy or the alcohol was kicking in, you felt a little lightheaded. As Lin Qing reached out to pull you, she exposed a barely noticeable purplish-black bruise on her slender arm. Li Mingliang's attention was instantly caught, his eyes turning sharp in a split second, as an indescribable fury surged within his heart. He abruptly slammed his liquor bowl down, stood up, and grabbed you tightly by your collar, demanding furiously, "What did you do to my sister? What's going on with the injury on her arm?" And you claimed you changed for the better. I think a dog can never stop eating feces. You haven't changed a damn thing. You were caught completely off guard by this sudden interrogation. Was Li Mingliang drunk and throwing some kind of alcohol-fueled fit? Following his gaze to Lin Qingshui's wrist, the realization suddenly dawned on you and you hurriedly explained, "You've misunderstood." But speaking up to this point, you couldn't go on. That bruise was indeed caused by you, though it wasn't what Li Mingliang was imagining. Your hesitating and stuttering manner only made Li Mingliang even more certain of his own assumption. How could he possibly be willing to listen? He only believed what his own eyes saw. His older sister Lin Qingshui had always been fragile and weak, and now there was actually such a bruise on her wrist. How could he not feel heartbroken for her? He swung a punch right at you, roaring in fury, "You bastard! How dare you bully my sister!" You were hit and stumbled back a few steps, nearly falling over. Clutching your painful cheek, you didn't strike back at all, merely repeating over and over, "You really misunderstood. I didn't bully your sister. Seeing this, Lin Qingshui hurriedly rushed forward to pull her brother back, explaining anxiously, "Brother, you've really misunderstood. I accidentally caused this injury myself. It has nothing to do with him. Stop hitting him. Sister, if you're suffering any grievances, just say it. At worst, just get a divorce and come back. Our family isn't short of food for you, and it doesn't matter even if you can't remarry and stay an old maid." Lin Qingshui was deeply moved, but this time he had truly misunderstood. She could only blush furiously and whisper a few words into Zhao Xiaoyan's ear. Hearing this, Zhao Xiaoyan looked at her in absolute surprise, and then under her firm gaze stood on her tiptoes to whisper something into Li Mingliang's ear. After listening, Li Mingliang looked at his older sister. Seeing her nod her head at him, and knowing the words conveyed by Zhao Xiaoyan didn't seem like a lie, he finally slowly let go of your collar. However, the anger in his heart hadn't completely dissipated. He was merely forcing himself to hold back from blowing up again. As for Li Mingliang's misunderstanding, you actually felt it was perfectly normal. You were an absolute scumbag in your past life and had beaten Lin Qingshui plenty of times, which was exactly why you didn't fight back at all. Looking at the corner of your bleeding mouth, Lin Qingshui also felt a sudden pang of heartache. She knew her brother did this purely out of a protective mindset, to shield her, but she also knew that you were completely innocent this time. She glared at you. "If it weren't for you being too wild in bed, how could my brother have misunderstood?" Even after whispering with Zhao Xiaoyan for a long time, Li Mingliang was still a little skeptical. How could doing that kind of thing injure an arm to that extent? But looking at his sister's deeply embarrassed expression, it seemed to be completely true. Li Mingliang didn't want to apologize, but merely said harshly, "If you ever dare hit my sister, you just wait and see. I won't. I will treat Qingshui very well. You promised over and over again." After going through this little storm, Li Mingliang's attitude toward you also changed somewhat. How much of a scumbag was his brother-in-law before? He was the type of guy that even a dog would tuck its tail and run from upon seeing him. Yet, after being hit by him, he actually didn't even fight back, merely looking submissive and incredibly aggrievedly at his sister. On the way back, your brain felt quite hyperactive. Hunching your tall body over, you rested your chin on your wife's shoulder, your mouth repeating the word wife from time to time. Fortunately, there weren't many pedestrians on the road, so Lin Qingshui didn't feel completely embarrassed to death. She didn't know why this man was starting to act crazy from the alcohol again. In the past, whenever he got drunk, his strength was immense, and if anything displeased him even slightly, he would torment her. But right now, the person following closely behind her seemed exceptionally clingy, holding her hand from time to time and whispering in her ear, the exhaled alcohol breath making her neck feel incredibly ticklish. As you approached the village, she stopped her steps and said to the person behind her, "You stand properly for me and walk properly." As she spoke, she adjusted the position of their daughter in her arms, carrying her all the way back. Her arms were indeed a bit sore and tired. This man kept wanting to carry the child, but since he had been drinking, how could she dare let him hold her? Although his steps were perfectly steady, it was pitch black and she didn't dare take that risk. Reprimanded by your wife, you straightened your back and obediently followed behind her. One day, carrying your gear, you prepared to go up the mountain. Your main goal today on the mountain was to verify a suspicion of yours. A few days ago, you plucked a handful of wild celery, wanting to bring it home for seasoning, only to find that it couldn't be thrown into the space. At the time, you thought the space was broken, but throwing other items inside was completely normal. Not daring to eat it, you took that handful of wild celery to the village clinic. The village doctor told you that it wasn't wild celery, but poison hemlock. Poison hemlock looks extremely similar to wild celery in appearance, but the entire poison hemlock plant is highly toxic. Accidentally ingesting poison hemlock can cause burning and swelling of the mouth, severe diarrhea, and symptoms like difficulty breathing. In severe cases, it can cause death within a dozen or so hours. You stuffed 2 packs of cigarettes and a rabbit for the village doctor to repay him for saving your life. Right before you left, the village doctor also secretly stuffed a copy of the Divine Farmer's Herb Classic into your hands, telling you that you absolutely must not eat random things on the mountain. He also stuffed a packet of his homemade insect repellent powder into your hands. Suspecting that your space had the ability to detect toxins, walking along the lush green trail, you bent down from time to time parting the grass to search around. Before long, you discovered a lot of wild mushrooms, among which were quite a few highly tempting-looking shiitake mushrooms. You picked them while throwing them into the space. It was pretty much as you speculated. Those colorful, obviously poisonous mushrooms could not be taken into the space at all. This could be considered an auxiliary function of the space toxin detection. Besides plants, you also wanted to test it on animals. You deftly navigated through the mountain forest, your every step appearing cautious and agile. Whenever the rustling sound of leaves gently rubbing together came from your surroundings, you would react instantly, skillfully picking up your slingshot and loading it with a marble. The marble shot out with astonishing speed and accuracy, piercing through the dense vegetation and striking those venomous snakes trying to hide in the shadows. The struck venomous snakes instantly twisted their bodies in pain and then became completely motionless. You tested a snake with its head chopped off and a snake without its head chopped off. Discovering that only after the venomous snake's head was chopped off could it be placed inside the space. You picked up a 7-inch viper, pressing along it with your fingertips until you felt a hard object in the venomous snake's abdomen. Next, you pulled out a small knife from your cloth bag, sliced open the venomous snake's abdomen, located the snake gall, tied the gallbladder opening tightly with the bile duct, cut it off, then peeled off the outer fatty membrane and carefully put it away. The snake gall and snake meat could both be stored separately inside the space. After handling all of this, you looked at the remaining snake body, wiping your hands with a handkerchief while contemplating. You wondered if your wife would eat snake meat. Snake meat is actually very tender and delicious. You decided to bring it back and ask her first. If she didn't want to eat it, you could just bring it to the market to sell. Fortunately, you had the space, otherwise these snake galls wouldn't be very easy to preserve. You took out a bottle of ergutu liquor from the space, opened it, and dropped the dozen or so snake galls inside. Aside from drying them out, soaking fresh snake galls in alcohol is the absolute best preservation method. Suddenly, 2 distinct wild chicken cries came from the nearby forest, sounding exceptionally loud in the quiet mountains. With just a brief listen, you quickly pulled out your slingshot and a marble from your waist. With a sharp whoosh, the marble drew a smooth trajectory through the dim light, shooting out fiercely and accurately like a shooting star cutting through the night sky. A wild chicken that was happily hopping around the forest didn't even have time to react before it was struck by the rapidly flying marble, instantly losing all vitality in its body and tumbling to the ground unable to move. You walked forward at a swift pace and gently picked up this wild chicken which still had the marble embedded in it. Stewed chicken with mushrooms, a perfect match. Wife, I'm back. You placed the 2 wicker baskets down in the courtyard. Lin Qingshui took a glance. Today's harvest is pretty good, huh? While washing your hands, you asked Lin Qingshui, wife, do you eat snake meat? Lin Qingshui glanced over at that large pattern-skinned snake with interwoven dark green scales. Just looking at it was enough to make her lose her appetite, let alone eating it. If you don't eat it, then I won't cook it. Seeing Lin Qingshui's blunt refusal, you realized she didn't have a taste for it. So you stuffed the snake into the basket with some regret and covered it with grass to prevent it from being an eyesore to your wife. After washing your hands, you took out all the picked mushrooms and shiitakes to dry them in the sun, and also washed a portion of the wild vegetables, preparing to turn them into side dishes. And the rest would be used to make pickled vegetables. You cooked very fast, and in no time, you called out to Lin Qingshui to eat. Zhengguo, why is this soup so delicious? Lin Qingshui asked curiously. This is a soup made from wild vegetables and mushrooms from the mountain. I picked a lot of them and brought them back. Seeing that winter is coming soon, if we pick more now and dry them up, we can still eat them as vegetables during the winter. It's really delicious, Lin Qingshui praised endlessly, speaking while picking up food with her chopsticks. She actually couldn't eat that much herself, eating 1 flatbread, and drinking a bowl of soup was more than enough. But you can't just pick these things randomly. Some of them are poisonous, and if someone who doesn't recognize them eats them by mistake, they could die of poisoning. You reminded her? Zhengguo, how do you know so much? Lin Qingshui asked curiously. Probably the power of knowledge. Anyway, I can tell whether it's poisonous just by looking at it. Lin Qingshui didn't ask further questions. This version of you was great, way better than before, and she liked it very much. The next evening, you took a bath, changed into a set of clean clothes, and took Lin Qingshui to 4th uncle's house. The one getting married was your distant cousin's son. According to the village custom, the new bride would be welcomed tomorrow. So tonight was for entertaining close relatives, to sit down and have a meal. The men sat at a separate table to drink alcohol, while the women sat at another table to eat and chat. At this moment, 4th aunt walked over to the women's table holding a jar. This is fruit wine brewed at home. The alcohol content isn't high and it won't get you drunk, so drink up. She spoke with a forced smile, knowing you were a tough one, who doted on your wife intensely, and she was afraid of offending you. Second aunt was the first to pick up the bowl in front of Lin Qingshui and poured a bowl for her. Drink it, Qingshui. It's sweet and not harsh. Lin Qingshui looked at the fruit wine in the bowl, picked it up and gave it a sniff. It carried a faint sweetness, so she took a sip. Although it wasn't exactly sweet and was even a bit tart, the flavor was indeed quite good. After drinking it, there wasn't that strong burning sensation. It didn't taste like liquor, but more like soda. At this moment, the wife from the Wang family nearby couldn't help but summon up her courage, leaning close to Lin Qingshui's ear and whispering, Qingshui, keep a close eye on your man. Look at Hui Hui. Instead of acting like a proper guest, she just had to run over to the men's table and even sat right next to your Zhengguo, flirting and posing. Following her gaze, Lin Qingshui cast a sidelong glance at the men's table not far away. She saw Zhang Hui Hui shyly pouring drinks for the men one by one, looking just like a fawning lapdog. She retracted her gaze, looked at the Wang family's wife beside her, smiled, and didn't say anything. Seeing that she was completely unmoved, the Wang family's wife felt that she seemed different today compared to usual. Heaven knows, when 4th aunt saw you bringing her along to the feast, she was scared out of her wits. deeply terrified that if any guest said the wrong word today, it would provoke you to throw a massive fit. The two daughters-in-law of the Wang family hadn't dared to go out lately, their faces swollen like pig heads. Word was they gossiped about Lin Qingshui and got beaten by Zhao Zhengguo. Looking at Lin Qingshui from such a close distance, her features were beautiful as flowers. Her skin so fair and tender it looked like it could ooze water, and her figure was flawlessly stunning. From time to time, a faint fragrance could even be caught from her. Let alone men, even she as a woman couldn't tear her eyes away. She was truly bewildered in her mind. They were both women, so how could she be born looking so beautiful? Sensing the gaze of the Wang family's wife beside her, Lin Qingshui raised the fruit wine in front of her and said to the person beside her, sister-in-law Wang, "Let's have a drink together." Hearing her call her sister-in-law, the Wang family's wife's dark face bloomed with sheer joy. She raised her fruit wine to drink with her and said, "Sister, if you ever need anything in the future, just tell me. Although I only married into this village a year before you, I know everything about the affairs around here." The women at the table, seeing how easygoing the city-born wife Lin Qingshui was, couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. They were no longer as constrained as before, and would occasionally chat with her a bit. Over at the men's table, Zhang Huihui, who was sitting right next to you, intentionally rubbed her leg against yours under the table from time to time. Noticing that you dodged away from her and didn't even give her a sidelong glance, she refused to believe that you had absolutely no feelings left for her. Zhang Huihui purposely drank a bit of alcohol to fake dizziness, unable to resist leaning her body toward you. Although you avoided her every single time without leaving a trace, the more you acted like this, the more unreconciled she became. When the feast was breaking up, the Wang family's wife saw Zhang Huihui pestering you, so she opened her mouth and shouted, "Zhengguo, come quickly. Your wife seems to be drunk." Hearing her words, you stood up, walked over with large strides, and reached out to take her over from the Wang family's wife, wrapping one arm around that slender waist. Your gaze glanced at the wine pot on the table, asking a question. "Did you guys give her alcohol to drink?" The Wang family's wife said cheerfully, "We just gave her a bit of the fruit wine brewed by fourth aunt. Who knew she could get drunk even on this?" At this moment, Lin Qingshui's body was completely limp as she leaned into your chest, her long and beautiful phoenix eyes flashing with the dazed blurriness of intoxication. A rosy flush covered her face with dark hair and red lips, and her moist bright red lips parted slightly as she cried out to you, "Hold me." As she spoke, her fair and slender arms wrapped around your firm, lean waist that didn't have a single ounce of flab. This action of hers made the conservative women standing around all feel a bit embarrassed. You also didn't expect that your wife would actually be so cute when she was drunk. Unable to stay angry, you scooped up the drunk woman by her waist and walked out of fourth uncle's house with steady steps. You originally wanted to go to sister-in-law's house to pick up the child, but seeing that your wife was already drunk to this extent, you could only give up on the idea. Along the way down the road, Lin Qingxiu in your arms was exceptionally restless, her fair little paws aimlessly groping and messing around all over your body, even ripping off a button from your white-collared shirt. You almost couldn't control yourself from taking care of your wife right then and there in the wild, and only managed to hold back after restraining yourself over and over. Fortunately, it was night and pitch black outside, with nobody on the road along the way. Carrying her into the house, you strode into the bedroom, bending over to place her onto the bed. Afterward, you squatted in the courtyard to keep watch, pulling a cigarette out of your pants pocket, lighting it and letting it dangle from your mouth as you tilted your head back and took a deep, heavy drag. Building a new house was truly an urgent matter that couldn't be delayed. The next day, Lin Qingshui was woken up by the sound of firecrackers, still carrying a lingering sleepiness. She propped herself up with her clear eyes open, leaning limply against the headboard. She remembered going to fourth uncle's house last night for the feast. At the time, because she found the fruit wine delicious, she gave into her cravings and drank a bit too much, and couldn't really remember what happened after that. Outside the bedroom, hearing the movement inside the room, you came to the doorway and asked, "Wife, are you up? The new bride Qingxiang is marrying is about to enter the village. Once you've changed your clothes, I'll take you to see the new bride." Inside the bedroom, Lin Qingshu, who had already changed her clothes, lifted the curtain and walked out, asking Zhengguo, "Where is the baby?" "It's not good to keep letting sister-in-law help us, right?" "It's fine. Sister-in-law said she doesn't like joining in on the buzz, so we'll go pick the baby up in a bit." She happily went to the yard to do a quick wash, then followed you to watch the lively scene. At this moment, the inside and outside of Qingxiang's small courtyard house were packed with people, making it extraordinarily lively. The moment you arrived, Zhang Huihui spotted you. Standing at over 1.8 meters tall, you stood out like a crane among a flock of chickens in the crowd. Lin Qingshu still felt a bit embarrassed, but you didn't feel embarrassed at all. Grabbing Lin Qingshui's arm to make her link arms with you. "You're my lawful wife, so what's wrong with linking arms?" You turned your head and glanced at the person linking arms with you, then retracted your gaze and muttered, "From now on, you're not allowed to drink with others." Your deep voice carried an unquestionable seriousness. Hearing her own man's words, Lin Qingshu was utterly confused. She nonchalantly tilted her face up to look at her man beside her, but when she spotted your open collar, bearing a bite mark that couldn't be hidden, and could vaguely see scratch marks on your brow, she froze for a moment. Could it be that after she got drunk last night, she threw a drunk tantrum and caused this mess? Connecting this to how she was wearing your clothes this morning, she thought her skin had grown thicker than before, yet she still faintly felt her cheeks burning with a shameful heat. Lowering her eyes, when you noticed her fair cheeks blushing like a rosy sunset, you secretly wondered, is she being shy? Meeting her own man's scrutinizing and questioning gaze, Lin Tingsu gave you a half-annoyed sharp glare. What are you looking at? Then she gave your waist a fierce pinch and said without any pretense, you can only look at me. Do you hear me? Seeing her like this, your thin and well-shaped lips curled up into an exaggeratedly wide smile. Then you glanced at the new clothes she was wearing, retracted your gaze and looked at the newlyweds entering the room. Every single move you two made fell right into Zhang Huihui's eyes not far away. At this moment, she felt an exceptional agony in her heart, believing that everything Lin Qingshui currently possessed should have originally belonged to her. She regretted it. She regretted listening to her family back then saying that you were just a thug with no future, which made her stop being persistent, no matter what. She couldn't give up on Brother Zhengguo, such a great man, whether in terms of appearance or capability. Brother Zhengguo was way better than the blind date guy she was currently seeing. No matter what it took, she must snatch Brother Zhengguo back. Given Brother Zhengguo's capabilities, he would definitely be able to make something of himself. Letting her eat meat every single day and wear brand new clothes wouldn't be a problem at all. Thinking of all this, Zhang Huihui adjusted her clothes with one hand, smoothed out her tied ponytail, and pushed through the crowd to stand before the couple. With eyes full of affection, she said, Brother Zhengguo, have some soda. As she spoke, she thrust the soda bottle in her hand right in front of you. You had one hand shoved into your pants pocket, while your other arm was being linked by the person beside you as you looked at Zhang Huihui, saying half-heartedly, you drink it. I'm not thirsty. At this moment, someone started jeering to tease the groom. At the critical moment, the groom pushed the bride out of the raucous crowd. A bunch of young unmarried teenagers instantly boiled over with excitement, and the courtyard became a chaotic mess in no time. Seeing this, you reached out to protect the person beside you tightly in your arms, avoiding any contact from the crowd, and carefully shielded her as you walked out of the shoving rowdy crowd. Once you got out, your deep eyes scanned her entire body. Did anyone bump into you? Only after she shook her head did you retract your gaze, taking that fair jade-like hand to head back home. However, at this time, Zhang Huihui was unable to squeeze out of the crowd. She felt several hands taking advantage of the chaos to grope blindly all over her body. This left her an unmarried girl, feeling utterly humiliated, alongside being frightened out of her wits. She wanted to get out, but someone pushed her right back in again. During this chaos, she didn't even know who ripped open the buttons on her chest, exposing the white camisole inside. Anxious and terrified, she shielded her chest with both hands, her eyes welling with tears, not knowing what to do. She desperately tried to search the crowd for the man she constantly longed for, only to realize at that moment that he had already left shielding Lin Qingshui in his arms. In that instant, she had a bit of a breakdown. Unable to stop herself from crying out loud, Brother Zhengguo, I'm still here. But the boisterous noise completely drowned out her cries. Lin Qingshui's eyes wished they could just be glued to her own man. Seeing that his sharp, well-defined features were indeed handsome, it was no wonder that Zhang Huihui was desperately rushing forward, wanting to become a stepmother to her daughter. Because of this, she didn't look at the road, tripping over her own feet and stumbling, her body leaning straight forward. Seeing this, you quickly and deftly extended a long arm, catching that slender waist and pulling her entire body into your embrace. Frowning, you said in a cold voice, watch the road. Pressed against that broad and sturdy chest, Lin Qingshu finally let out a sigh of relief. Glad she didn't take a nasty face-first fall, she completely ignored her man's words. And as she walked side by side with her arm linked in his, her gaze remained glued to his body. On the other side, after the crowd finished teasing the groom at Qingxiang's house and dispersed, Zhang Huihui's clothes had been ripped and torn beyond recognition. Given that there were too many people present at the time, no one would admit to laying a hand on her during the chaos. Even though Zhang Huihui was sobbing uncontrollably, among the crowd of onlookers, not a single person stepped forward to say a word on her behalf. It wasn't until Zhang Huihui's mother learned the news and rushed over in a hurry, scolding and cursing that she finally took her back home. This matter quickly spread through the village. Somehow word reached Zhang Huihui's fiancé. Upon finding out about this, instead of standing up for her, he called off the engagement directly. This incident became the ultimate gossip topic, over meals and tea around the village. A few months later, on the day the main beam of the new house was placed, more than half the village showed up. Standing on the ladder, you personally set the final main beam firmly and securely in place. The firecrackers exploded with a loud crackling sound, red paper scraps falling like flower petals onto the newly laid blue brick walls. The two-story building gleamed with a brand new luster under the autumn sun, its glass windows bright and shining, making it the absolute first of its kind in the entire Zhaojiawa village. Standing in the courtyard, you held your daughter in your arms, while your eyes kept searching through the crowd. Lin Qingshu was wearing a red sweater, standing in front of the stove scooping rice for the helpers. Inside the steaming hot giant pot, the wild boar meat you hunted from the mountain the day before yesterday was stewing, its fragrance drifting through the entire village. She was so busy that fine sweat beaded on her forehead. Her cheeks flushed rosy red, and she would glance over at you from time to time. The moment your gazes met, she would quickly look away again. Li Tiantian walked up to Lin Qingshui holding a bowl, whispering, "Sister-in-law, look at Big Brother. His eyes look like they're practically glued to your body." Lin Qingshui didn't say a word, but the tips of her ears turned completely red. After darkness fell, the helpers dispersed one after another. Since the new house hadn't completely dried yet, the family of 3 still slept in the eastern room of the old house. With their daughter fast asleep in her small bed, you lay on the brick bed, using the moonlight filtering through the window to look at the person curled up in your arms. Lin Qingshui rested her head on your arm, her breathing soft and gentle, her body still carrying the warmth from the daytime bustle. You lowered your head and kissed the crown of her hair. She didn't wake up but simply snuggled deeper into your embrace, staring with your eyes wide open. You looked up at the roof beam blackened by soot and smoke, remembering your past life. At this exact time back then, you would probably be dead drunk, lying by some gambling table, having lost the very last cent on you, completely unaware that the woman and child at home were starving. But at this very moment, the person in your arms was real, her warm breathing steady and even. You suddenly felt that your luck in this lifetime was worth more than all the money you made in your past life combined. The next morning, before the sky was fully bright, you got up. Inside the kitchen, you sliced yesterday's leftover wild boar meat into thin pieces, cracked 2 more eggs, and steamed a bowl of egg custard. By the time Lin Qingshui came out holding the child, breakfast was already set up on the table. After eating, I'll head over to the market site. You placed a piece of meat into her bowl. There's still a bit of final balance payment to settle over at the market side, and I'll see if I can get some good lumber while I'm at it to make a few decent pieces of furniture. Lin Qingshui gave a nod, lowering her head to eat without saying a word. Staring at her expression, you knew she simply couldn't bear to see you go out, yet felt too embarrassed to speak up. So you reached out and pinched her cheek. "I'll definitely be back before dark." Lin Qingshui looked up to glare at you, but she didn't dodge away. After you left, Lin Qingshui held the child and strolled around the courtyard. The windows of the new house hadn't been fitted with glass yet, using plastic sheets to temporarily block out the wind. She stood right in front of them, looking inside through that layer of thin plastic sheet. Inside the empty rooms, it was no longer like that pitch-black, filthy appearance from before. With snow-white walls and flat concrete floors, the sunlight filtering through the windows lit up the entire room brightly. She suddenly remembered the year she had just married into the family. She lived right in this old house, where wind leaked in during winter and rain leaked in during summer. She would curl herself up in the corner of the brick bed, listening to the sound of you drunkenly kicking the door open, shaking all over from pure terror. Back then, she thought her entire life would just be like this, dragging herself through one day at a time, and if she couldn't take it anymore, she would just die. But what about now? She lowered her head to look at their sleeping daughter in her arms, then looked back at those 2 brand new blue brick rooms, feeling as if she were living in a dream. In the evening, you rode back on your newly bought vintage bicycle, with a bundle of lumber tied to the back seat, and a bag of brown sugar hanging from the handlebars. When you entered the courtyard, Lin Qingshui was sitting under the sunset while holding the child, that red sweater on her body, dyed with a warm glow by the afterglow. You parked the bicycle, walked over to take the child from her arms, and used your other hand to hold her hand as you walked toward the new house. "Let's go inside and take a look." You pushed open the wooden door of the new house. The inside had already been mostly cleaned and set up. In the side room stood a newly made square dining table, which was a ready-made one you had asked someone to buy for you from the town. The brick bed in the inner room was also fully built, covered with a brand new mattress you brought back from the county seat. Lin Qingshu stood at the doorway of the inner room, looking at that window lined with clean white paper, suddenly remembering something. She said softly, "If only we had days like this earlier." You didn't let her finish her sentence, hugging her from behind and resting your chin on her shoulder. "Every day from now on will be just like this." The daughter in your arms woke up, opening her bright black eyes and reaching out her tiny hands while babbling away. Lin Qingshu lowered her head to look at her, the corners of her mouth slowly curving up. Outside the window, the sky had completely darkened. In the distance, someone's house lit a lamp, the dim yellow light filtering through the paper-covered windows, like scattered stars. The village dogs barked a couple of times and then quieted down again. You gathered both your wife and child into your embrace, listening to the sound of their breathing, and your heart suddenly felt incredibly grounded and at peace. In your past life, you had everything, except them. In this life, you didn't want anything else. Having them was more than enough. The sound of footsteps came from outside the door. It was Li Tiantian returning from next door. She knocked on the main living room door with absolute caution. "Big brother? Sister-in-law, I'm back." Lin Qingshu broke away from your embrace and went to open the door with a blushing face. Standing right where you were, you watched her retreating figure, and suddenly called out, "Wife." She turned her head and looked at you in confusion, but you just smiled and didn't say a word. She gave you a sharp glare, then turned around to greet Li Tiantian. Holding your daughter, you stood in front of the new house's window, gazing out into the pitch-black night. Your daughter babbled and cooed, her tiny paws scratching at your face. You lowered your head to kiss her soft, chubby cheek and whispered softly, "Niu Niu. Our good life has only just begun."